Yeah, and hold on. Let's take us off of priority for a second. And there we go. And yeah, so it is great for everybody to see us. We'll see you. We see us. Welcome to the Late Night Load. It's me, Web C, and my co-host Leprechaun,
Woo!
and we are here hanging out. Just getting into this special interview. It's going to be a long night. I expect this to be one of our longest shows that we've done so far for the Late Night Load, and I'm excited about it. We're just going to get into it. The Model Rocketeer might be in and out, or he might be hanging out in the chat room tonight for this show. So shout out to the Model Rocketeer. Safe adventures for you, Rocketeer, because we know the weather's bad over in your area. Wind knocked out some power lines and stuff over there, brother. So we're over here rooting for you, and keep your head up and stay safe, brother. As for us, we're gonna get into this video. I wanted to show you guys something real first. I got some stuff on my phone. We'll just not close that, but go back out of here, go into my gallery. So I got something on camera last night, and I wanted to share this with you guys. All right. So I'm going to zoom in and stuff on it while I'm filming. Do you guys know what that is?
It's
It's
like a
beginning.
planet.
It's starting. So the starting of that's Jupiter, and I believe they said it was Venus. It's either Jupiter, Venus, or Neptune. It's either Venus or Neptune. And they said it's the starting of the alignment.
Mm-hmm.
So this year, apparently, we are supposed to align with 5 of our neighbors. So it's supposed to be like Mercury, us, Mars, those 2 planets. So you're supposed to see soon. We're going to see all 4 planets plus us. Now I don't know if we'll be able to we won't. I don't know how many other planets will be aligning. But Eileen, my wife Eileen, she was talking about it tonight with me before she went to work, and we had taken this. We'd walked outside and we saw this, and I was just like, "Wow!" I was like, "So look at that. That's so cool." And my phone just got it like super good
That's
quality.
a really nice crisp video,
Yeah. So
video or view
exactly. So I
pic.
was so happy to share that with you guys. As you guys can see, I've been playing with my new toys and stuff. I painted up a baby Grogu, guys. That dude he just looks so super cute.
That's
The
great.
baby one looks cool, man. So I gave that one to my wife, and then yeah, that's all from tonight. So that
Hopefully
was
you
what I
gave
wanted to
his
show
little
you.
crib. Hopefully you gave his little crib like some like little blaster like hits.
Not
Like
yet, but that is a great idea, and I'm digging that. So yeah, we're gonna get back to YouTube, and so like I said, tonight's show on YouTube is going to be these 2 guys right here. I'm not a big a Shawn Ryan fan, but I am a big Dr. Stephen Greer fan. And the other day, I was just sitting there and I was like scrolling through TikTok or something, and I found like these Shawn Ryan show clips of Dr. Greer talking to him. And I was like, wait a minute, there's more than 3 clips. This means like there must be a big, long episode. So I went and found it, and sure enough, like less than 2 weeks ago, we can definitely look it up here. Just flip it this way. 11 days ago, yeah, less than 2 weeks ago, this interview happened. So, Dr. Greer asked us, everybody who watched this specific show, asked us to share this and share all of his data, everything that he's put out, all his movies, everything. And so let's just get into it. You can hear good, right?
I do not have any audio right now.
Don't have any audio? Oh.
Documentary scheduled
There we
for
go.
release
You're good.
in 2023 called The Lost Century and How to Reclaim It. The documentary addresses how energy solutions have been suppressed in the past and how they could now come out for the benefit of mankind using an open source strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been telling you that I was going to dive into this subject for a long time, and now we have one of the leading experts on extraterrestrials and free energy. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Stephen Greer to the Shawn Ryan Show. If you haven't, please go down, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave us a comment, and share this information with everybody you know. I want to give a special thanks to all of our patrons for supporting the show. It's because of you guys that this happens. I also want to thank everybody who's just watching the show and sharing it. If you can't join Patreon, please head over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, and then head over to Spotify, leave us a review over there. All right, without further ado, please welcome Dr. Stephen Greer to the Shawn Ryan Show.
Woohoo!
Dr. Stephen Greer to the Shawn Ryan Show.
They can still hear us while the show is playing, too. They
Yep.
just can't see us. But I can see you. You better smile.
It's really too bad the Model Rocketeer had bad weather because I know he'd have been all over this info. This would have been a good one to have all three of us. Good old weather just shutting us down.
Mm-hmm. Minnesota, we have the infrastructure for this type of for wind and cold.
Yeah.
We just got tired of it fucking cutting out on us, I think.
Well, I mean,
Put them cords in the ground.
All my power's underground.
Dr. Greer, welcome to the Shawn Ryan Show.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It is an honor to have you sitting across there. I've been following your work for a while now. I've watched all the documentaries. It's fascinating information that you're putting out. I can't believe you're even sitting here. It's a real honor. But
It's an honor to be with you, and thank you for your.
Okay, so what the craziest thing I think about the whole thing is Dr. Greer like hijacks the show right here. Like he just starts off and he becomes the host, and Shawn Ryan like becomes like just like a spectator, just like us. It's
Well,
kind of
as
crazy.
he should have. He is not stupid.
Right.
I appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. So just a little bit about you. I gave you an introduction just a few seconds ago, but you've briefed every president since Bill Clinton on the subject of UFOs. You have 3 personal friends that have been assassinated since, I believe, May 9th of 2001.
Those were before.
Yeah. May 9th, the reason I bring up May 9th, 2001 is that's when you first hosted the National Press Club for the U.S. UFO Disclosure Project, which ironically was just 4 months before September 11th, 2001, where over 20 intelligence officers came forward with information about UFOs, right? Whistleblowers. The main reason you're here is whistleblowers. Would you like to go in there?
Yeah, I do, and I want to start early on. So the way this evolved in the early '90s, I'd started a project dealing with this, and we had set up a protocol where we had made contact with these objects. That ended up being on the front page of the Pensacola, Florida paper. Army intelligence and CIA found out about it, and then they came in and started asking me, what are you doing? How are you doing this? And that started a whole process where people there were friendlies and unfriendlies in the U.S. government and other governments who reached out. And the friendlies were people who were very much read into some of these projects, who knew that they'd been managed illegally. And they began to advise me. Now, never been in the U.S. government, never been in the military, never been in the intelligence community. So I started out pretty cold and pretty green. I'm an emergency doctor, trauma, big ER. Each of us saw 6,000 people a year. The gun and knife club, we called it. And by '93, I was being asked to go up and brief the CIA.
Go lay down.
Bill Clinton,
No.
James Woolsey. Now, I'm a 30-some-year-old medical doctor going up, and the letter that came to me, and this is the key point I want to make, stated, and I have it, it's in my archive, it's going to come out pretty soon publicly, and it says, you're going to be the first person to brief the Clinton administration and the director of the CIA on this issue, because they've made inquiries and have been denied access. Now, huge red flag should go over everyone's head right now. You're talking about the President of the United States, the director of the CIA, making through channels an inquiry on something that they know is happening, and they're being denied access. So immediately I knew either that was a lie or the whole enterprise has gone off the rails in terms of being managed illegally and improperly. So at that point, I went up, took the meeting. The cover story was a dinner party for me and my wife and the CIA director and his wife, who was the chief operating officer of National Academy of Sciences, and our host, who was a think tank director for the Pentagon, and his wife. So there's 6 of us. And sure enough, he was very shaken. He absolutely had not been read in. And so I provided him a lot of information. I brought a whole briefcase full of evidence. I mean, just positive evidence, documents, photographs, this, that. And this is 30 years ago this year, December 13th, 1993. So at that point, my whole paradigm tilted, where I realized there's something very wrong with this. I didn't know anything about, the popular terms now, or the counter state, or the deep state, or secret government, illegal projects, on and on and on. It was off my radar, totally.
You had no idea at the time.
No,
that any of that was happening.
This was, I had actually sort of a serious PTSD over this, because it was like completely upended, my world, and my thinking about our country and what had happened. So I started digging into this, and I'm a full-time emergency doctor. I was chairman of the department, and I got more and more involved. And I made an early call for people to come forward who did know about this. And at that time, the Disclosure Project, in that incarnation, let's call it, was called Project Starlight. And Project Starlight was a briefing process for the executive branch and then eventually members of Congress. So I ended up putting together all this information and whistleblower testimony, documents. I ended up receiving some top secret documents that were not declassified that I have and have published, because we came to the conclusion that these projects were being run unconstitutionally, and therefore all personnel, all evidence, and all documents pertaining to them have no protection over from the National Security Act. They cannot be kept secret if they're going to operate outside the oversight of the constitutional oversight requirements of the president and the Congress.
What were some of the things that were in the top secret documents?
Well, I have one that's from Nellis, so-called Area 51 area, where there was a security alert by some civilian groups trying to see what was going on there. And it has the distribution list. The document isn't that important, except for, because it was a security alert, but the distribution list is important, because it has the project code names and code numbers. That document, which was dated 1990, in the 90s, is one of the documents I gave, for example, to the president's people, and also eventually when I briefed the J2, the head of intelligence, Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Wilson. And that was on the top of the pile, because I said, look at the distribution list here, follow that thread. And so, for example, in the case of Admiral Wilson, now, he's head of intelligence, Joint Staff, Admiral. He made an inquiry into this based on a portfolio I had couriered to him. But he was denied access. And there's public documents now about this that leaked out. And look it up. And what happened is that he was also threatened personally and with demotion. So this was all happened kind of prior to my stand-up briefing at the Pentagon Forum, which happened in 1997, over 25 years ago.
So 1997. I mean, we were kids. That was cool.
I was 14. I was already smoking and drinking.
I was 97. I was like 9. Wasn't that far yet. But thinking about that, it brought me. So what's crazy and what's so special about this interview is so now that he put a timeline to it, like where we are right now. Everything we've been watching for the past couple weeks and stuff about all this ties into him. Everything we've been watching, that Project Crystal Night stuff, that Planet Serpo thing, and everything. That all is going to tie in here. That's all going to come up. I'm pretty sure of it. And he's just like he just talked about, like, at this base he found, wherever that base is, that's the same base where those dudes were training to go to Planet Serpo.
Okay.
Like, so I'm just going to add tidbits like that as we go along.
And it was a very disturbing event for him. For me, by then, I was battle hardened. I realized what was going on. He was shocked that he had been threatened and denied access to these projects. I wasn't. But I said, well, you're in good company. SecDef, the Secretary of Defense has, the President, the Director of the CIA. And by then, I had met with key members in the Congress and Senate Intelligence Committee. They had all been pushed aside and denied access. So by then, I had already accepted this new paradigm of there being, as Senator Inouye said, and I'm quoting, there's a secret government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own funding mechanism that's above the law and free from the law itself. I'm almost giving an exact quote here. And, that's something that most people have to understand first off here, is that what we're dealing with is not a sanctioned or even a normal black project. And I can say this with authority because I am working now with people who literally manage the black budget of the United States currently. And they were denied access to all these projects. They had no idea that there were deep black pass-through projects. We'll get into this. How is this done? Structurally, organizationally. What's the architecture? So it took me a long time to unravel this. And I had to do it through multiple documents, corroborating witnesses, people on the inside who came forward. So in 2001, by then, I had concluded neither the White House nor the Congress was going to touch this. So we launched the Global Disclosure Project, where I gathered together the first 20-some of these military and some corporate people and had a press club event. It ended up being seen by about 800 million people. Interestingly, the first hour of it was jammed. There had been jamming devices put on the structure of the National Press Club. But it eventually got up, and it used up every T1 line in the city available back then, in 01. And, what happened from that was that then there was a whole movement launched that is going to this day. It's a very slow process because you're dealing with U.S. government, moves like a glacier. And that's complimentary. But I think that the reality is you can't blame people. There are these sweeping conspiracy theories that are all wrong. That, somehow, I was just talking to a congressman yesterday who had this idea that there were people in his party who were hiding things from him because they knew things, because the process going on now in the Congress, much of it is in classified skiffs and briefings that I know about. But in reality, those people who are trying to get to the bottom of this, they don't know anything. I mean, they're still asking, is that tic-tac, as they call it, this UFO footage, you can drop it in, that are the Hornets, F-18s were chasing off of San Diego. Is that, from China? And of course, as soon as I saw it, I matched it to a 1967 image we have of a Lockheed Skunk Works, so-called anti-gravity device.
So that'll be us.
It's us, it's U.S. Well, let's call it global. It's part of this secret government asset base. So to give a little deeper unpacking of this is like at the end of the meeting with Admiral Wilson. So I'm doing the stand-up briefing. It's supposed to be 45 minutes in his conference room at the Pentagon. And I have astronaut Edgar Mitchell is there, who was the sixth man to walk on the moon, my military advisor, and a couple witnesses, whistleblowers. And this goes on for almost 2 or 3 hours, 2 or 3 hours, much longer. He kept canceling because he was so concerned. And at the end of it, I said, look, we really need your help getting to the bottom of this and getting these rogue, illegal projects under control. He says, well, what am I going to do? He says, I can't act. I'll be rogue unless the Secretary of Defense and the President authorize me to do something like this. And I said, well, that's not going to be forthcoming. I've already attempted that. And he also said something that was very spooky. He said, how do I take on a group that have technologies that can do circles around the best thing I know we have, a B-2 stealth? Because that's the best thing I know to deploy. And I have found out, and I have now convinced there is a secret organization that have technologies that can literally do circles around my B-2. I said, yes. And he just said, it's point set match. He says, I don't even know how to take that on. And that is how that meeting ended. It was very grave. And I went, well, there's a difference. Those projects are being run outside the law. And I said, the law is only what you empower, is only what you use. If you don't use the law, and if you don't use power, then you let sociopaths and criminals run it. And unfortunately, that's what's happened since the late 1950s. I later found it was on Eisenhower's watch, unfortunately. He was old, he was tired, he was a 4-star general, World War II, that this group of the secret government group sort of seized control over these operations. So in reality, the constitutional government of the United States has not been in a proper oversight and control of these operations since the late 1950s. Since the 70s. Yeah, almost 60. Yeah, 2/3 of a century. Wow. So that's sort of just to give an overview of how this evolved. And now it's evolved to a very...
All right. That was weird. The internet's acting a little slow tonight. So
Yeah, that's weird.
I just wanted to let everything get caught up because it just looked like he was like way off and everything. I was like, what's going on? So
Yeah, it was
big
a
event
little...
that's happened. About a month ago. So Congress passed and the president signed a law that has for the defense funding, National Defense Authorization Act. And it explicitly allows people to come out as witnesses, whistleblowers on the UAP, UFO issue, including contractors, not just government employees, but contractors like Lockheed Skunk Works, Northrop, Raytheon, Booz Allen Hamilton, MITRE Corporation, SAIC. These are all big chief primary contractors working on the reverse engineering of extraterrestrial material and also the building up of systems based on that and other technologies. So
why do you think it took so long for this bill to come about?
It just has to, when we released about 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, Unacknowledged, of Amazon Prime or Tubi or Hulu or whatever, that documentary got about, in the first 6 months, 760 million people see it. Now, most of that was pirated, dark web, Pirate Bay, whatever. It was fine. What I'm doing is a not-for-profit purpose of educating the public on this. I left my medical career to fix this massive problem for not only our country, but for the world and the future of humanity. But that, caused a lot of stir, and it triggered a series of events that has now led a few years ago to the law being passed that the Director of National Intelligence must report on this issue to the Congress. But now, I told folks that I'm working with, and I can't disclose exactly who they are, but they're the most senior people, and said, look, there needs to be a clear pathway, because the only way you're going to get this, you're not going to get this through the chain of command. You're going to have to get people who come in as whistleblowers and witnesses, who are direct witnesses to this, even if it's a small part of what they saw. Maybe they were only guarding a hangar where there was one of these triangular objects that my uncle's old company. My uncle worked on the lunar module, put the first man on it north of Grumman. But which is part of how I had an interest in this. If your uncle kind of put the first man on the moon or was part of that, is sort of a fun thing for a little boy. Yeah. I was 14 when we landed on the moon. But it was just a great thing to have a family member involved with that. But I think that, most people underestimate how important every little detail is. So what I did in the 90s up to the 2001 event, what I've done since, is put together sort of a whole puzzle, a mosaic, based on thousands of little pieces of data. Mm-hmm. So, the evidence is easy to get your mind around one at a time. What's hard to get your mind around is the entire intelligence analysis that has to go with it. So that's what I've specialized in, is gathering that data and then connecting all the dots. How does this corporate operation interface with this base and this skiff? For people who don't know, the secure compartmented information facility.
Yeah, a skiff is where highly classified documents, conversations, mission planning,
right?
That's where it all happens.
Right,
it's in a skiff.
Right. Yeah. And I've been involved with that, although I wasn't supposed to be. But I get ushered into places, even though I've never been in the government. I will not accept a clearance or a secrecy oath or non-disclosure agreement. So all this I'm telling you, I can tell you because people who know the system will know I hold my own clearances in that sense. I can say what I want to whomever. What my rule is that if let's say you were someone who had been involved in an operation at the Dugway Proving Grounds out in Utah, there's a dumb there, deep underground military base that's very much involved with this issue. And there are assets there, man-made, anti-gravity, very advanced aircraft. That I have people who have been there who've seen them come up at night and move out at the huge black triangles. And those are ours, by the way. Now, there are some extraterrestrial ones that are similar. So if you can envision this, almost any airfoil or superstructure that they've observed that's of an extraterrestrial origin, they've been able to create, let's say, copycat or similar. But this makes this very confusing and unfortunately opens up the possibility of a number of false flag, or what Pentagon called deceptive indications and warnings operations, false flag operations. But so let's say that you're one of those guys and you come to me and you say, my name is so-and-so, here's my DD-214, you can prove you were there. But you say, I don't want to ever be identified publicly. But I will go into the skiff to provide this information to the people who have now made this pathway for me to come forward legally. Then I will arrange for that to happen. That's what we're doing. And I'm making a call right now. Anyone, no matter how small or large your involvement was over the last 70 years with this issue, there's a pathway, there's a door open. We don't know how long it'll stay open.
You can synthesize the super weapon Gloom Nova.
No.
It claims to return everything to zero. Such a handsome
Bad
weapon.
camera.
You haven't yet?
Here's some reasons
I am Optimus Prime.
therapy is too expensive. They don't have time. No one
Now, back to the show.
Pathway, there's a door open. We don't know how long it'll stay open.
All right. So here's his little
Probably
commercial.
heard me talk about my psychedelic journey.
So take a quick break. Let's think about this. He just unloaded on us like a big thing. Like there's a window. He's saying like he got them to open this window, but if the powers that be don't like that window being open, they can turn around and close it, is what he's saying. And so he's like, you need to, like, there's many people out there, get into that window, put your message out. Let us all hear it. Let us know. It's funny. Did I ever tell you that I actually had to make a UFO report?
No.
I made one back when little Dustin was like 2.5. Caden was like a 3-month-old baby. And we were heading home from some event out in Indiana or something with Eileen's family. and we were coming home, and we were going through Wisconsin almost to Minnesota, and we got chased for like 6 miles by a UFO. Shit was crazy. And like we're in a big, huge, giant SUV, and there we are getting chased by a UFO. So, anyways, I was like, who do I tell about this? Like, where do I go? Anyway, I found this like website of over like 190,000 reports of UFOs. Like, it was this big website. And anyways, I reported it and everything. They even contacted me back, like, to ask me more questions and stuff. They were like, "Yo, your encounter seems really random. Like that's a weird place for you to have been followed by a UFO." And I told them no. I said, I've been around that stuff my whole life. Like even as a younger kid, I've seen things moving in the stars and stuff. Like that shouldn't be moving. Why is that moving? And then just watching it, like back when we were kids, we didn't have cameras and stuff all the time, so you just had to just witness it and accept it. That something moved.
Nope. Nope.
Yeah. So this is I was thinking about actually trying out what this dude is about to advertise as for my health.
Last year and all the benefits that came from doing it. I haven't drank any alcohol or had any caffeine in almost a year. My anxiety is gone and my anger is gone. A whole list of benefits came from that, and that led me on this journey to researching the benefits of mushrooms and fungi in general. And in my research, I found this company called Mudwater. Mudwater is a coffee alternative with 4 adaptogenic mushrooms and herbs with a fraction of caffeine as a cup of coffee. I have energy without anxiety, jitters, or the crash of coffee. What I really like about Mudwater is that they took the time to find the perfect ingredients to make a product to help you feel better every day. I genuinely believe that this is a good product. Mudwater is Whole30 approved, 100% USDA organic, non-GMO, gluten-free, vegan, and kosher certified. Mudwater also donates monthly to the Berkeley Center for Science of Psychedelics, as Mudwater believes the country is in a mental health epidemic, and so do I. Go to mudwater.com/Shawn to support the show. Use code Shawn for 15% off. That's mudwater.com/Shawn. Use code Shawn for 15% off.
All right, there you go, Shawn. Salute to you. There's your little
Looking to
promo
get
so
your
you can make
financial
your money
future
off of us
organized?
too.
Well, if you don't have life insurance yet, that should be at the top of your list.
Yeah, we're not doing this.
It's a very big breakthrough that there is this legal mechanism so that the constitutional government of the United States can get informed on this properly. And what I discovered, this was a very strange thing from 93 to now. Every time I take a meeting with a high-level member of the U.S. government who should know about this given their rank or their position. For example, when I briefed years ago, the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, General Patrick Hughes, a 3-star. Well, as anyone knows, in the military, that position is the top of the food chain for military intelligence, period. It's and the DIA is like the CIA for civilian. It's military. He had completely been denied access.
The director of the DIA is completely denied access.
I had a multi-hour meeting with him in his office with my senior folks. And it was another, these data points, people remember them as I go through them. How, in what universe can the head of the DIA or the CIA or the president or the chair people of armed services in the Senate or the Select Committee on Intelligence not have been read in on this? When we are funding it, we estimate there's somewhere over the last 70 years, $8 to $10 trillion that have gone into these projects that are unaccounted for. Remember, the day before 9/11, we have a videotape of Rumsfeld at the Pentagon. I'm not sure he knew it was being recorded because I'm shocked that he said it. And it's in Unacknowledged, the documentary. He says, and now this is now 21, 22 years ago. He says, there's $2.3 trillion unaccounted for in the Department of Defense budgets. Trillion, not billion.
How do you have that much money unaccounted for?
Oh, you do. Let me give you an example.
I believe it.
They say, it costs $2 billion a plane to make E-2 stealth. It's about $150 million. The rest of it goes through the back door into these unsanctioned projects that neither the president nor the Congress knows. Never mind the American people. Multiply that across the whole system. So we'll get into this in a moment. There are other more creative ways of this organization, this secret illegal organization. I view this group that's doing this as the world's largest RICO, racketeering influence corrupt organization, like a mafia. But they've become pretty much untouchable till now. And I'm not saying we need to go after them aggressively in a negative way, but it needs to be disclosed. And we need to have the people's representatives and the constitutional government at least informed about it. And they are not. The thing that's most shocking to me, even to this day, is that every time I take a meeting with this, and you're meeting with someone of that rank, like the General Hughes, here's a 3-star in charge of DIA. It was so crazy that he's sitting there, and we start talking. And he had made inquiries through the chain of command of DIA. He says, the only thing I've got, he goes over to it in his conference room for the general. I had a bookshelf, and there was a little, corny little like ET doll, like you'd see at a toy store. Mm-hmm. And he grabs it. He says, this is all I've gotten for my inquiries through the channels. Rage. I said, and I was going, yes, sir, this has happened to most of your folks who are in your position, unless they were brought in and came up through the ranks because they were identified as sociopaths who would break the law and run an unsanctioned illegal operation for decades. There's your criteria. Now, people like yourself, let's say you had been assigned to a project dealing with this. You'd have no way of knowing, as it way up at the food chain, that this was an illegal operation. There would be no foundation. Yeah. So you would have been completely innocent. So all of you guys listening and women who, if you have been involved with this, you're not culpable because you're not at that policy making level where you are willfully insubordinate to the Constitution, which, everyone takes an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
If you're anything like us, we're
Man,
very competitive. So
that was such an important highlight of that sentence.
We've been known as the.
Like he really highlighted that and domestic part. Like he was like, yeah, motherfuckers, you're fucking toting the very bad line right there. Like let's reel you back in, show us what you got so we can all play with the fun toys. That's where it's at. We're at that point where there's a whole bunch of cool technologies, and he's like saying, come forward, tell us about it, talk to us, come on. I'm thinking about that. That's what I'm thinking.
Large domestic here, because the worst treasonous acts that have ever happened to any country that falls is from within. Yeah, so that's what we're talking about here. So I want to be very clear about it. I know I'm coming on a little bit strong on it, but I am so outraged after dealing with this for 30 years and seeing this drag on. So what my concern is that now that this law is in place, and it's only a month and a half on, right? We need to move expeditiously, quickly through that door that's opened. Because who knows when someone may slam it shut. And there's a window we have to go through. And I think that we've started that process. So what I'm doing is putting out a request, and to appeal to people's patriotism. My father was hand-to-hand combat on amphibious landing unit World War II. I had pretty bad PTSD from that, although they didn't know what that was. But I kind of feel like we have to look at this and go, given how this is operating, it's our patriotic duty to fix this problem, just from the point of view of the rule of law and civilization and the Constitution. Otherwise, what are we? We're a bunch of monkeys running around the jungle without the law. Yeah.
We call this
the other issue is what's behind the secrecy.
That was my question.
That was when my first meetings with people, like the CIA director, after like 10 minutes of going through the evidence, he says, yeah, I know this is real. He wanted to know, why is it this level of secrecy? Who's keeping it secret? How are they doing this? So that is actually the bigger question. The evidence you can get your mind around. We have it. It's been out there. If you look at Unacknowledged, if you get the book, we have a book called Disclosure. It's 500 some pages of transcripts of these original top secret people's testimony and documents. It's all in there. So you can get Disclosure book. You can get Unacknowledged, the book. It goes with the documentary. It's there. But understand, and we also describe how this is operating. But the way behind it is kind of banal, in the sense of it's money and power. So let's say you have something that would fit on a little table this big, and it's a generator, and it's pulling energy out of what's called the quantum vacuum, or zero-point energy field, which was proven to exist back in the 50s. Now, physicists have described this energy field. If you had a coffee mug, the amount of space in that coffee mug has enough potential power to boil off all the oceans of the world, quote unquote. It's what Tesla called, not the fake car company, actually Nikola Tesla. We call it fake Tesla cars because if they're plugged into the grid, they're not real Teslas. We'll get into this. But that energy field is everywhere, and you can tap into it. And when you tap into it, you're tapping into this energy field that can be converted to electricity or thrust.
So is the energy field, is it everything in between objects? Is that?
It's not just between, it's within. So if you let's take the chair you're sitting in, or I'm in. It's occupying a volume of space. When you get past the molecular to the atomic level of this, and then subatomic, the quarks, you get this into this pluripotent, it's like the foam at the surface of the deep ocean.
Okay.
That all of matter is fluxing in and out of. The early Lockheed Skunk Works man-made UFOs were called flux liners.
Flux liners.
Yep. Where they were pulling energy from this quantum vacuum flux field. Very advanced physics. I mean, we understand it very well. I want to put your audience to sleep going into the arcana of the physics of it. But the point I'm making is that was mastered decades ago.
This technology's been around for decades.
Well, about 100 years that there has been empirical evidence of this energy field. Nikola Tesla called it the infinite energy field. There were others who discovered it all the way back to the late 1800s. Now, they didn't have the physics down of what was happening, but in terms of just observing the phenomenon empirically, here you set up a high voltage system, suddenly more energy is coming out than you're putting in. Those are called over unity systems or free energy, because once you get it tapped, it's just flowing, right? And so that means that every home, business, car, manufacturing, village in Africa would be able to have a device that would not be very expensive, frankly, to mass manufacture, that would generate all the energy they need for all the needs that we have for a modern civilization. And this would be wonderful. There's no pollution. There's no radiation. And once you have the system, there's no cost. There's no refueling. The bad news is that if you're an oligarch, a global oligarch, controlling the macroeconomic system, big oil, big global systems. And let me translate for those of you who've been in the Middle East. Our vital national security interest translates to one word, OIL, oil, energy. So the problem is, if that technology were to be disclosed, it's a quadrillion dollars. It's $1,000 trillion or more in proven assets, oil, gas, coal, public utilities that are obsolete. It's like a royal typewriter or a horse and buggy.
Right.
That's what they're protecting.
So the entire energy field, everything that has anything to do with energy becomes completely obsolete at this point.
Yeah, and all transportation systems, internal combustion engines, jet engines, rockets, surface roads. So now, surface roads, I say that only because when you take that same physics and do a torsion, a counter-rotating field, you can get what's called an electrogravitic effect, or anti-gravity, pop culture term. It's a terrible term. It's not anti-gravity, but you can create this electromagnetic field where an object becomes essentially weightless and can move. This is why if you look at the radar tracing,
Pyramids.
these objects can be moving at 200,000 miles an hour, make a right.
What's up?
I said, makes you think right away of maybe the pyramids.
Yeah, I mean the pyramids are definitely popping up in my head. I'll show you guys a picture. I'm going to show you something. I don't show people
I
this
actually
very
sent
often.
you a video earlier today of a guy talking about controlling elements with frequencies.
All right, this is just going to be a quick peek. I'm going to show you something that I've been working on. I'll let you take a closer look at it when you come out tomorrow.
Yep.
But I'm actually designing something that will lift like anti-gravity. Not anti-gravity, but it'll do the same theory.
Yep.
So, yeah. Bringing that up. Just thought that was related. Hey, my brain, I've been working on cracking space travel for 10 years now. I've been doing mathematical equations on paper and stuff for 10 years now. Off and on, I don't focus my whole time, obviously, to it, but it's, once in a while when I get a couple minutes of free time, I sit down and I'll fuck around with the stuff that I've been working on for it. Are you ready to go back?
Let's go.
All right.
Hand turn. And there are occupants on these. Now, any pilot knows if you had the G-forces of that, your brains would come out of your nose.
Yeah.
No way it'd be fatal. But because it's correcting for 1G, and there's a sort of a bubble, an envelope in space-time that this object is moving in, there's no limit to what it can do. So
They don't feel the G.
They don't feel it and go straight up, at like one of the radar things we have from Belgium, I got from the Belgian Air Force, was an object that was at, slightly above AGL, a few feet above ground level. And it went from there to boom, like 100,000 feet in one radar swoop, boom. We have a lot of cases like that we've collected. And, the question at this point is, how is that happening? Well, we know how that's happening. And so here's the issue with disclosing all this. When you get past the superficial level, here's a machine, here's a device, here's this, the scientists like myself are going to say, well, how is it doing that? And if they have a thinking brain, which of course is the big assumption now with our educational system collapsing, sorry to say, but my God, kids that are now trying to get educated in the system now, God help us all. So, but the fact is that's going to be asked. Now, what's interesting is that the Pentagon has officially said those objects that have been released of the Tic Tac and other UFOs that have been documented with sensors on ships, on board aircraft, and in space. Well, they're not disclosing those sensors, but I know what they are. Those are physical objects moving without any known means of propulsion. Go look at what's been said by the Pentagon. Now, what the person who said at the Pentagon says, we don't know how they're moving because that spokesman hasn't been read in to these deep black projects that are in this parallel universe of this secret government. It's been my job to collect the actionable intelligence, the documents, and the people who know this and put it together and put it into briefings for people. So I've provided this to every Minister of Defense and Secretary of Defense for 4 of the 5 Eyes, which are, of course, U.S., Canada, Australia, UK. I have not done it for New Zealand. But, in every single case, when I've met with these guys, either they're former or current MOD heads or what have you, they've said, we were never read into this. So this data point, let me extend the data point globally. So some years ago, there was this really amazing guy named Lord Hill Norton. He was a 5-star admiral. They used to call him a Sea Lord. Don't you love? I mean, I love the British. They're fantastic. A Sea Lord, and he had been head of the MOD, which means in the UK you're head of MI5, MI6, like our CIA and stuff. But he was also head of the military committee for NATO. And I met with him at his house in Wiltshire, in Hampshire, in England, some years ago. And he asked me to come because he wanted me to bring the briefing document that I had put together for the president. I think at that time it was the late Clinton years. And I said, all right, I'll come over. And I went over with my 4 daughters and wife, and they went off to see the Salisbury Cathedral. And I went and met with this former MOD head. And he was livid. He says, this never came across my desk. I was never read into this. And I said, and yet I have files from your own MOD about the landing of one of these objects at the Bentwaters, Rendlesham Forest, Bentwaters Air Force Base.
No kidding.
Yep. I have the documents. I have the trace landing. I have the U.S. military Air Force people's testimony that were there.
Commercial time.
What is a woman?
Oh no, not this shit.
People's testimony that were there. So at this point, I have about 1,100 of these folks.
What's a trace landing?
When one of these, in this case, it was an extraterrestrial vehicle, not one of the man-made ones.
Mm.
So we call them ETVs for the ones that are of extraterrestrial origin. The ones that are man-made are often called ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles, meaning that they're simulating, not totally, but simulating the energy propulsion capabilities of what we've reverse engineered and studied since the 40s.
Okay.
We'll get into this in a moment. What's the technology transfer arc from the 40s to now? And that's very interesting. It's going to be in our new film called The Lost Century, and How to Reclaim It is the subcaption title. But the Minister of Defense was furious, and you know, he was a bit bombastic and kind of, you know, piercing blue eyes, a real character, but he was, I think he was hurt. I mean, if you have that level of responsibility and you find out you were zoomed on probably the most important military and intelligence issue in the 20th century, 21st century. He said, well, why would they hold me? So it becomes personal for these men. And I said, well, let me ask your question with a question. He said, oh, what do you mean? He thought I was being an impertinent yank, which I can be. But no, I was doing it as sort of a way of sort of illustrating this point. And I said, well, what would you have done if you had found out that there was an organization and a project, global, that had engaged in assassinations, wet works of innocent people, killings, the CIA term wet works for, you know, if you're on the watch group list, which I have been on, and that is engaging in all manner of criminal activities up to including drug running, has embezzled trillions of dollars from Western economies. And they have the technologies that would save the Earth's biosphere in a generation in poverty. But they are now an existential threat to the world and to the United States and your country, the United Kingdom. And he almost jumped out of his chair and says, I wouldn't have stood for it for a bloody minute. Like that, just in a rage. And I went, well, that's what they didn't tell you. He says, what do you mean? I said, because you're not a sociopath. You're not someone who would absolutely, willfully know about that and go along with that agenda. And I call it, because I'm a doctor, I call it a soul biopsy. They do a deep psychological analysis, and they will test people early on in their career if they will do the right thing or the wrong thing. If you're willing to do things that you know are ethically wrong to get ahead, it's the very definition of a sociopath. Then you get groomed little by little by little by little by little. And I said, but you are deemed not to be of the right stuff, not John Glenn astronaut right stuff, but the right stuff for someone who had been involved at that level, higher level, because you would never have gone along with that agenda. And if you hadn't gone along with it and you knew about it, they would flat out kill you. Absolutely. Like the Secretary Forrestal, for a fact, was thrown out of a hospital window and killed. General George S. Patton, an alleged automobile accident, was killed because he would want to disclose to the public the anti-grav device that looked like a saucer that we got from Germany in 1945. How do I know this? Because Paul Mellon, one of the few billionaires in the world who funded Adolf Hitler, along with Prescott Bush, George H.W. Bush's father, Henry Ford, and Watson of IBM. Paul Mellon was one of the few billionaires at the end of World War II, the Mellon family. And his grandson's on my team, who happens to have been Senator John Warner's son, the Republican senator from Virginia, just passed away. And Paul Mellon told John Warner IV that when the war ended, they went over and grabbed this thing because Adolf Hitler, his aerospace geniuses, were working on this disc. It was not jet or rocket. It was electrogravitic. It was electromagnetic. They hadn't perfected it. They were working on that. We had the atomic bomb. But they brought it back. And Patton was going, George Patton was going, this is amazing what this would do for the world. No. This is going to be deep black. And he did not think that was a wise thing to do. So they took him out, made it look like an automobile accident. So this kind of skullduggery happened. So I told the Minister of Defense, this is why they're not going to tell you. And because you're a good man, you're patriotic, you're sincere, you have morals and integrity and ethics. No one like that is going to get at the top of that food chain. Because by definition, you've got to be somebody willing to subvert the law and do all manner of horrific things. And this is where people have to understand there have been CIA directors who were involved with this. I dealt with one who was helping us after he retired, Bill Colby, CIA Director Colby.
When was he director?
Ford Nixon era.
Okay.
Way before my time, but he was an old guy wanting to help us. A lot of these people, when they get old enough to think they're going to meet their maker, they get a conscience or they have a change of heart, as they get up into their 70s, 80s, like that. But it has nothing to do with your rank. This is what people have to get their head around. Whether you're president, CIA director, SecDef, this senator, this member of parliament, if you know about it, it's because you were read in because you're willing to go along with that agenda. If you don't know about it, you have the same rank. It's because they assessed that you wouldn't go along with that agenda, which is an illegal operation.
Yes.
So this is what everyone needs to get their heads around. Now, the only way to resolve this are people who don't. I had this fire of tests where I started out very early in my work on this, involved with the director of the IA and the head of Army intelligence and all these sort of people. For a reason we can get into in a moment, because basically my group had discovered the Rosetta Stone of being able to contact these objects, and it works. Go look at the movie Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. It's kind of out there stuff, but it's real. So I think that when you start to entertain this idea of how this is structured, you got to get your mind first around that. But also, on top of the fact, and this is a really key point, please listen carefully to this. We have this bill that we worked to get through that's now gives a pathway for anyone to come forward. Now, they will be coming forward to folks who are going to take them into a SCIF, and it'll be TSSCI type stuff. So their testimony may or may not get to the public. If they provide it and are willing to provide it, I will provide it to the public. Why? So listen very carefully. By 1997 in the fall, we had concluded, my military advisors and all these people, that I had sort of a kitchen cabinet. Because everything you're hearing me done, we've done without an office, without a paid staff, without a budget. It's all been a labor of love. I put million into doing this.
15 million.
Earnings and everything. I don't care. I mean, when I realized what was at stake, it's like, I walked away from my medical career, this was very hard. I still have dreams about being in the ER doing stuff, but that chapter is closed. And plus I'm too old, I'm 67. So, that's not an older guy's game. It's tough. I was mountain bike and surf. I had fun. But what you realize by this time, I've gone through all these meetings and briefings. I said, well, this is an illegal, unsanctioned operation. And if it's illegal, it's outside the Constitution. And therefore, all the National Security Act laws and all the non-disclosure agreements all these men have signed are vitiated. They're null and void, canceled. So we wrote a letter, and those of you in the military may know this kind of a ruse. It's called a UNOD, unless otherwise directed letter. Okay. And the way it works is I wrote a letter that's an assessment. And it said, based on the following meetings and intelligence we've gathered, it's our assessment that all projects related to the UFO issue, including the man-made research and development projects and the extraterrestrial issue, have been run in an illegal fashion outside the Constitution because the people who should know if they were sanctioned don't. And they have been deliberately lied to and deceived. Because of that, they cannot enforce legally in any court in the land a prosecution against any whistleblower, anyone with material, and anybody with documents. And I said, and I gave 90 days for all the different, it went to every head of every agency and relevant Department of Justice, FBI's, the whole alphabet soup. Return, receipt, requested. So you got it, signed for it, got it back. And I waited the 90 days, and then I declared, okay, now we're going to go public. So I pivoted from doing these private, off-site, often, briefings for members of Congress and executive level folks over to a publicly disclosed project. And that was how Project Starlight, which was this quiet operation that I was doing just with senior folks in the government, became the Disclosure Project. And so the Disclosure Project then led to the 2001 National Press Club event you mentioned on May 9th. But there was a process here. I want people to understand. I wanted to dot my I's and cross my T's, that I wasn't running afoul of the law, and I was going to give the U.S. government every opportunity to do the right thing and get their move into this issue. And they wouldn't. The president was intimidated. Members of Congress didn't know what to do about it because they were individual members. They hadn't come together and passed a law. That took another 20 years. See, I've been trying to give you the arc of this so people understand the context. So at that point, we did it. And, I had the first 100 or so of these guys that we have on videotape. And then about 22 of them came to the National Press Club event. Now, the ones that are the more deeper sources, some of them didn't want to come forward because they were afraid. And even though they knew about my unless otherwise directed letter, that was from a civilian making the statement. And they wanted an official pathway. And I said, well, I don't control the Congress. I can only, sort of advise folks. And if they don't do it now, and this is why this is such a huge breakthrough for your people listening to this show. There are a lot of Navy SEALs and Delta guys and Force guys and certain Marine branches that have been at facilities, been tactically or operationally involved. We need you to contact us. And here's the website, SiriusDisclosure.com. But you just write to info@SIRIUS disclosure.com. And we'll handle it very confidentially. If you don't want to be known publicly, you never will be. But I will arrange for you to be brought to the correct people in D.C. who are the best folks I've ever found. They're former special operations military that are now the equivalent of if they were in the military, they'd be a 2-star general, but they're working in the congressional end helping with this. And they're not known by the public. It's not what you see in the media. And they will see that that information gets to the people who need to know. I can't be more specific because I'm walking a razor's edge here with what I'm saying. But that's what we're doing. And we need people to understand that this is a patriotic duty, given what is at stake. Because here's what is at stake. First of all, the Constitution and how intact is the constitutional government of the United States. That's been completely subverted by this issue and the people who control it. Secondly, the future for our children. I mean, I just had my 12th grandchild born. What kind of world do we live in? You know, I always tell people we don't have a free market. How do you have a free market if the most important scientific technologies in the last 100 years have been ruthlessly suppressed, people killed, and they've been illegally classified so that we're still burning diesel and jet fuel A?
Yeah.
We don't need it. Now,
do you want to talk a little bit about why they're hiding all this technology when it comes to free energy with the utilities and everything, just to piece it together for everybody?
I do. It's one word or two words: money and power. Now, when you're talking about, most of us think, gee, money, do I have enough money to put my kids through college? These guys that's not the issue. It's massive macroeconomic geopolitical power. Because now we're talking hundreds of trillions of dollars in assets. Now, keep in mind the entire U.S. government budget, whatever it is, $5 trillion, it's a rounding error. And most of that's not discretionary spending. That's entitlements, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. So when you're looking at these interests that want to maintain the status quo of the world financial, macroeconomic, and energy system, they will do almost anything to maintain that, even if it kills the planet, keeps, right now there's 3 billion souls on the planet that don't have any way to cook their food. They're chopping down rainforests and shrub in the desert in Africa. They don't have any electricity or gas. 3 billion. This just came out in The Economist, mainstream economic journal. So how do we, and that of course builds into the extreme poverty. It leads to radicalization, terrorists, resentment of the West. I mean, there are huge implications for this mistake that was made almost a century ago. Now, and this is known by a number of people, what a huge mistake this is. So when you're talking about the motivation here, I mean, people have killed for a lot more than $900 trillion, and the level of corruption is worrisome. Now, in '92, General Albert Stubblebine III, Byrd, who had been head of Special Forces and Army Intelligence, Fort Huachuca, he intercepted me after we had this major contact event out in Florida, near Pensacola. And he subsequently, about a month later, personally offered me $2 billion to not pursue what I was doing and become part of his team.
$2 billion.
With a B, in '92. And I thought it was a joke, and it wasn't. And he described to me sort of a black fund that they had gotten from the collapse of the Soviet Union in Eastern Europe, and that I would have complete access and control over it. But I have to be on their sort of team. They were trying to neutralize what I was doing. And as many people know, the CIA and some of those organizations have remote viewers who use consciousness to see remote places in the future.
Yeah, they've done studies with them.
All right. So that's something to talk about. Now he's starting to bring up the men who stare at goats.
Yep.
And that's just random. That's like out of left field. He's just like, oh, yeah, and they had the remote viewing's real. Like that's all this dude's here to tell us. What's real? He's like, this is real. All right. Great. That's kind of cool, though. I have read that CIA document that they released on remote viewing. And honestly, the Native American tribes in America have the best methods to access remote viewing through peyote and ayahuasca and those types of drugs will help you unlock the pathways in your brain to make the connections you need to make to do remote viewing. And it's pretty cool. I have herbs for my peace pipe that I can use for remote viewing. But we don't call it that in our religion. We call it spirit walking. So it's different. But he's right. It's real. It's you're using something to enhance your mind state, to free your mind from the astral and physical, like to separate the two. And then once you do, you can focus in on something, and your astral self will travel while your physical self stays. And you can still be conscious while your astral self is traveling. It's pretty weird. But the document was long. And basically, as I read the document the whole time, I'm just thinking about that George Clooney movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats, and just cloud bursting. Just, like I was saying last night, like cloud bursting. So, you looking like you're getting pretty tired there, Leprechaun.
Man, it's been a long day.
I
I'm
bet it
fighting
had.
it.
Yep.
And,
All right, well, we're gonna get back in this. I just wanted to stop and talk a little bit, wake you up,
no.
and get you geared in. I know Dr. Greer is kind of like monotone, straight edge. I'm not trying to excite you, type of talk. So it's for me.
Well,
I
he's repeated himself
a
multiple
couple
times,
times.
just in different ways, and it's just I love everything that he's given us. I just feel like there's certain parts of it, like that for this first hour here, could have been a 20-minute conversation.
It could have. I just think
I love that, you really got to find the real information within the sentences. There's some stuff that you can ripple out, and then, there's stuff that's like, okay, this is important. This needs to be noted. And so,
right.
I'm all for it. But yeah, it's definitely, it's given at a slower pace than I would prefer to receive.
I know it is. It's just that's one of the things with talking with him in general. His interview he did with Joe Rogan, I gotta find that one too. That one's a little more faster paced, and it's Joe Rogan, so
Yeah.
Joe's over there just fucking cracking up and
Yeah.
going, "Whoa," So
Yeah.
it
All
makes it a
animated.
little bit more. But this one's so new. There's new stuff. Like he's in this first hour, like he's given off 15 new things. He's told us and pointed towards 15 new things that we're not even thinking about. That we're not like it wasn't even on our radar that connected to that. So that was what's so amazing and what I liked about the first half of the video. And hopefully some of the stuff he talks about picks up a little bit more. But yeah, I think he's mostly on a mission to get more people to come in and start talking about stuff so he can have more things to talk
recruiting.
about.
He's definitely recruiting.
Yep. So,
which is important. It's definitely important.
Oh yeah, I knew Bob Monroe, all those guys. And Ingo Swan was a friend of mine, all these guys. But so they knew what kind of trouble this could make. I could make. So people have to also get their mind around the kind of just sheer, bribery, corruption that happens on top of threats, Oppo research, make up deep fake photos and videos to defame you. I've been called everything you can meet. And then they try to buy you off, and if they have to, they'll try to kill you. If you're doing things at this level, I've been like such a troublemaker for them.
I mean, I think it's not so hard to believe anymore.
Well, anyone who's done your work can see the kind of things that could happen.
I can see it, but I think a lot of the U.S. population can't see it. Unfortunately, I think unfortunately, but fortunately, the Epstein trials, and everything that happened around that, it's, the judge there was a assassination attempt on the judge. Epstein didn't kill himself. All these things, and so it's becoming more. I hate to say
accepted.
Yeah, I hate to say accepted, but it's out there, and it's becoming more and more and more common.
Well, and I think that, so imagine the stakes of something like you just mentioned, which I had no knowledge of, and it's just whatever. People are weird. Imagine something a millionfold.
Commercial time. Pumpkin seeds.
In terms of its
I'm gonna have to
implications
check that out.
for the stakeholders,
What you
want to
got?
maintain their
5-hour
hegemony and
energy.
control of the global military, industrial, financial sector. That's the level we're talking about. We're not talking about the boots on the ground, the guys who are the colonels who manage. I just brought a lieutenant colonel to D.C. who had been involved with these projects, and he had been watching what I'd been doing for 20 years and was waiting for this.
That'll give me at least 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Friends, with so much chaos and danger in the world these days, I highly recommend free with One of my biggest challenges in 2023 as an entrepreneur has been finding the right person for the job and making my company stand out amongst all the other companies in this extremely competitive job market.
Yeah, that's why I went out and got a leprechaun.
You might want to try ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter helps you stand out. You can try it and just apply. It's ZipRecruiter.com. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
They were involved for a brief period of time, or they were in an office here, or at a skiff there, or at a military facility, or a corporate research project. And they don't know necessarily this whole picture. And so they're not culpable. They're not guilty of having done anything improper. They were doing as they were told. And they thought it was all being run properly, legally. It wasn't.
Yeah.
So they were used. And I think that that's very important. And so they have no liability. And now they're protected by the law, and they're protected if we have to tactically for security, which I have. But I think at this point that sort of thing, it can't happen because the profile on this is so high. You know, I have a bunch of celebrities who like what we're doing. Something like that happens that I know about in my team, there would be 1 billion people who know about it.
Well,
yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about the suppression of all this stuff in Project Mockingbird?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go into that.
Well, Mockingbird was one project, but it's an ongoing process that started really in full bore in the 50s. And that was to have major media people who were dual agents. They were in the media, but they were also on the payroll of the agency, the CIA, or others who, and I have a document we published from I believe it was 92, where it says, it's a CIA document, we have people in every major news organization. It says it flat out, that are there to control, stop, alter stories at our request. So here's, I mentioned one myth, and that is that we have a free market and a free economy. We don't. It's managed. Because there's no way we have a free market economy when the most important sciences and technologies of the last 100 years have been ruthlessly suppressed. But the other myth that Americans buy into is that we have a free press, and the fourth estate, as it's called, a check and balance against excesses. But the major media, and also now the major tech companies, are actually actively involved in suppressing the story or spinning it. Now, what do I mean? When you see people on CNN or CBS 60 Minutes, the folks that they will allow to talk about it are people that have been cherry-picked by this cabal, this secret government group, to say what they're told to say. It's scripted.
Do you have any examples of this?
Yes, of course. Nick Pope, Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, all those guys.
Okay.
And they have been, I know for a fact, been told what to say. And so they say, number one, first big lie, these are a threat to the national security, inferring that from outer space there's a threat. It's not true. Civilizations that are hundreds of thousands to millions of years more advanced than we are, if they were a threat, we'd be a charcoal floating through space about 1945 August with the atomic bomb.
Absolutely.
Number two, they will say that we don't know what these are. Maybe they're from China. Maybe they're And even senior members of the Senate intelligence community have said that. We don't know. Because some of those guys have gone up there and whispered in their ear all this disinformation and spin. I know who they are. When in reality, we know what they are, where they come from, which ones are man-made and which ones are extraterrestrial. We absolutely have that data. But see, someone like myself saying that, that's going to get cut out of any show. For example, I was on a show that had 22 million people listening live back some years ago. And I started talking about some of the senior membership of this committee that's running this covert program. And I got to one name. You know, I talked about Admiral Bobby Ray Inman. He's been involved for decades in this. And then he went to the Board of Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC, one of the crown jewels of contracting on these exotic propulsion and energy systems. And then I think it was during the election, the second election for W. I mentioned that one of the most senior people is Dick Cheney. And we went to an unscheduled commercial break. A voice broke in. And the host had no idea. And it said, Dr. Greer, change the direction of this conversation now, or we will dump this show live. I said, with 22 million people listening. He says, yes. Don't talk about this. And the host was so sad. And the host to this day will say, oh, we can talk about anything. It's like when Joe Rogan says, oh, yes, I can talk free speech. To make his deal with Spotify, the show I did with Joe Rogan, forcibly by the corporate entity, had to be taken out. It is not in the lineup. You have to find it elsewhere.
Wasn't I just telling you that I got to go find that show because they don't want him talking?
Don't even know what a woman is. They've hired a biological male.
So anyone who thinks that the media doesn't purge whistleblowers of someone of what we're doing is naive. So Mockingbird, there have been a lot of code names for this. But we have a Air Force Intelligence, AFOSI guy that I have on tape. And it's in the unacknowledged documentary. People should look at it. It's for free. You can see it for free on all these sites. And he was at Kirkland Air Force Base. And he admitted, and I'm quoting, taking bags of cash to people both in the local and national media, reporters, to secure their cooperation with telling stories or altering or putting a spin on them. So that corruption and rot reaches very firmly into the fourth estate and now big tech. And, where it's been proven now through files released that people are shadow banned, algorithms are changed. We had a whistleblower.
I know for a fact there's a program that's been around since 2010 at least in cameras, actual cameras, that if you take too good of a photo of a UFO, it'll wipe your memory card. It's happened to me before.
Yeah, I believe that. I mean,
I still got the camera too.
I mean, our phones are our worst enemies when it comes to the whole Big Brother kind of thought process.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, if you walk through. Not even just listening. You have in my house alone. You have at least 6 different camera angles, and if you think about both sides of your camera angles, that's 12. You have 12 camera angles at any given time that can be tapped into in my house right now. That's just one house. That's conversations. That's visual. Yeah, it's what they've done with phones, and then getting us to want them and have them on us at all time. Even these, 12-year-olds and 11-year-olds. All we've done is just given them knowledge. We're giving them the blueprint of who we are, what we do with our time, because 70% of what this, especially younger generation, does at the time is sticks their face in their phone and surfs the web or watches TikTok videos, and you get to figure out what they want, and you can completely control your market because you already know what your market wants before you even put merchandise on the shelf.
Yep. And yeah, what is it? It's not even that, man. You know, you can have that conversation about some sort of item, some specific item, and then not even a day later, you're getting 4 or 5 ads on whatever social media and
A
whatever
day.
other thing
I've
of that item.
talked about a product and jumped onto Facebook, and minutes later, all of a sudden, I'm getting ads for something that I was talking about that I've never seen ads for on Facebook.
Yep. So, no, I totally believe that. I totally believe in that. Ready to start up again?
Let's go.
That we put his interview, he was willing to do it posthumously. So I did the interview with him. He died. His wife sent me his death certificate. And then I uploaded it on our YouTube channel, which I have. You can go to it. And his name was Pawlek, Pawelec. And he had been involved in the development of the embeddable radio frequency chips.
Really?
Yeah. And he knew of their use in simulating alien abductions that were being done by the CIA and military. We'll get into this in a moment, how deep the deception goes. So we put this up. In a few days, he hit 675,000 views. And then overnight, we checked, the counter is down to 6,700. They went in and chopped off those numbers so it would take it out of the algorithms as a trending video.
I've seen it happen.
Yeah. And so people who think that doesn't happen, I just want to say, you know, I got a bridge to sell you to nowhere or swampland to sell you because they're just simply naive. And this is another reason why we have to find creative strategies to do this, because the corporate, if you look at the major media, there's a handful of individuals and corporations that control all of it. And that becomes a problem when there's this collusion between these covert operations and corporate. Now, to give a little history lesson, late 1800s, early 20th century, something developed called fascism. Of course, now anyone that you disagree with, you call them a fascist. But the definition of fascism were large financial and corporate interests controlling government policy and what the government would do against the interests of the people.
Defeating a criminal
it's a commercial.
attack you is surprisingly simple.
Yeah,
You just need to follow the Romanian Rambo's
That dude looked like he was getting
rules.
beat up by his
What the
backpack.
government would do against the interests of the people. That's what fascism is. Go look it up. Thomas Jefferson warned of it. He actually wrote, warned of the unchecked power of the corporations corrupting government. That's where we are, but on a massive scale globally. So that's happened with the media. It's happened with the government programs, and it's happened in other sectors, financial, what have you. So the interests of we, the people, have gotten run over by the interests of a relatively handful of extraordinarily powerful corporate and individuals.
How many people do you think are involved at that level?
Give you a modern example, that Elon Musk dude just buying Twitter, like that upended a whole bunch of shit that was going on, like what he's talking about, like where they're fucking the government, deep government is going back and forth and controlling shit and making modifications to stuff. Like the Elon Musk dude, he came out and said, wow, all this stuff happened and I don't want nothing to do with this part. Like, I want everybody to know. Like, and then that's where, now you got the Twitter files incident.
Yeah.
There are 200 or 300 people on this committee. And one branch of it is called MAGIC, the Majority Intelligence Committee, MAJI, but committee is MAGIC. Well, I have a document that lists it. So this is in my book, Unacknowledged. That document's in there. It's a secret document required to publish. They can't punish me because I declared the project's illegal. A lot of people say, how have they not pursued you? I said, they can't. Because I had an FBI guy say, I said, let's put the handcuffs on right now and get on the dance floor. Because this is going to go to the, even if it goes in camera, it's going to go to a court. And I will be able to prove. Because what are we going to do? We're going to subpoena the CIA director that I briefed. We're going to subpoena the senators I have briefed. We're going to subpoena the head of the Defense Intelligence. All these people will have to tell the truth or lie. That in fact, they were left out. And so I said, I don't think you want a court case like that. Now, people say, man, this guy's a son of a bitch. Well, I'm sort of a fighter, and I'm not intimidated. But, so they offer me $2 billion. I go, fuck off. I'm sorry, my language, but get lost. And then they threatened, and in the 90s we had 3 people on my team killed, and I was almost killed. And then I put security in place. It's invisible. But basically, there are very powerful people who want us to get this done because they know what's at stake. And we've authorized lethal force if anyone that I'm working with is harmed. And that's in place. That's been in place since 1998.
Since 1998.
Yeah. And that's why no one I'm working with has had that happen.
Since
98, nobody.
Okay.
25 years.
That's dope.
That's good. Let's talk about your new documentary and what's coming up in that.
Yep. Well, if you go to the LostCenturyFilm.com, you'll see it's crowdfunded. So give you an idea, all these documentaries we've done, we won't let a corporation or studio fund it. We've crowdfunded from the people.
Can you explain why you have that way?
It's so that it can't be corrupted.
I knew it.
We control 100% of the content. Nothing can be taken out.
Good for you.
That's the way to do
it. Control over what's in and what's out. And it can't be watered down by some corporate shill or some media executive who's actually just been bribed by the government or some corporate entity working on behalf of this secret government. So I'm very careful about it. And that's why we did it, because I tried doing things with other people with their productions, and they would take it, spend it, mutilate it. And I went, no, we need to do this ourselves with integrity. So it's crowdfunded, and like this film, the LostCenturyFilm.com, we've had one donor for $150,000 and a bunch of people who donated $3. It didn't matter. But now we're at $421,000 out of a $500,000 budget. So we're 84%, if my mind's calculating correctly. Run a calculator. You have to do this as an emergency doctor. And so we're getting there. But we need people's help. It'd be great if we went over that amount, because then we can do more what's called marketing, promotion of it. And it's going to pull the curtain back specifically on the lost 100 years of these technologies. And it's going to go all the way back, more than 100 years, to the Stubblefield Earth battery and Nikola Tesla standing there with his old farmer, where he's running his whole farm on this device where he has stakes in the ground that are tapping into this electromagnetic and mostly magnetic flux field and running generators running his farm. This is 1902.
It's in 1902.
1902. And Nikola Tesla is standing there. Got the picture. This document is going to blow. It goes from that all the way to the Lockheed Skunk Works devices that started being built in the 50s. We have witnesses and transcripts of the Norton Air Force Base show, California. Norton's closed now. But they had an air show in 1988 where there were 3 of these man-made UFOs, ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles, hovering in this hangar. And we have those fully illustrated. We have enough detail. We actually have the schematics of the interior.
You have the schematics of the interior.
And the exterior, how they look. And these were built, interestingly, the witness who was there was an aerospace designer. Saw that the components in it, now this is 1988, were from the late Mercury era. So the Mercury capsule, which was late 50s, early 60s. And they had markings and charts on them where they'd been out in space around our solar system. They were specifically told these had gone through the solar system. Now, those were from the late 50s, early 60s. No jet fuel, no rockets.
Are these going to be in the dock?
Yep, everything. So this is going to be shocking. That's going to be a shocking thing.
Oh, yeah.
So it's about an hour and 48 minutes right now. We're just finishing it. We just had a great guy who's a supporter, the Limp Bizkit lead guy, Fred Durst. He's agreed to narrate it. So I just
He's narrating it.
yeah.
That's awesome.
I just got out of a studio with him a couple of days ago where we were laying down the track for the narration. But he's a great guy, very smart, super supportive of what we're doing.
Good. So what else is going to be in there?
Well, we're going to actually have a lot of the devices going through the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s that weren't the flying devices. But I'll give you an example. There was an inventor named Floyd Sweet, and he had a solid state device, looked like a little bigger than a cigarette pack, that you could attach to an electric motor, say for a car. It wasn't plugged in. Once it got going, it was a 0 point of the quantum vacuum flux, and it would run a 300 horsepower motor. So imagine having a 300 horsepower motor in your Tesla or your truck, and this little, there are no batteries. You don't have 900 pounds of lithium ion batteries, and the lithium ion batteries really are destroying the environment. And you never have to plug it in. About the time he was going to get, he was meeting with some people at GM who thought they were interested, but they were actually just trying to find out what he had. After that meeting, he died suddenly, suspiciously. How people claiming, well, he dropped dead of a heart attack. And that was plausible because he was an elderly guy. Mm-hmm. But before that, he had had an assassination attempt. He was going up some steps, and a sniper was trying to shoot it, but he didn't know it, but he tripped just as the bullet went right past his head. And we have the testimony of a lieutenant colonel who was involved in this case, who is a physicist also. This is going to be shocking to people.
Oh, yeah.
Utterly shocking.
You know, these mysterious deaths, some people are like, oh, you know, that, no way. Well, it does. We talked about the Epstein stuff. Let's talk, you know, the guy that invented the Hydra car.
I was just thinking that.
I mean, there have been so many. I've worked with people.
And then there was
who've done that.
If you could refresh my memory, but wasn't there somebody else that disappeared and they just happened to be involved in one of the mass shootings?
Smart Dollar is a financial wellness
Hey, Oz,
employees get
I'm loving this stuff, but I'm going to have to call it. I had a long day, and I still got to get up early in the morning with the kids.
All right.
Got another hour in me.
Get out of debt.
I'll probably get up tomorrow before I come over there and just watch the rest of this stuff, just because I am into it. But
Videos that will break down money concepts.
I don't got it in me. I don't got the hour, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'll be here. I'm gonna finish this out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then I'll see you round one something.
Absolutely. You guys have a good one.
Cool.
Yeah, there are a number of folks where things get set up like that around them. There was a guy doing this recent shooting up in New York where there was a man who had recreated this water fuel cell where your car could run off water. And just bizarre stuff. So one of the problems with all these inventors,
I mean, it's not a consequence. It's not a coincidence.
No, these are hits. But the problem is that if you're a brilliant electromagnetic engineer, but you don't know the bear you're about to poke with that technology and what they'll do to keep it suppressed, you're destined to fail. So one of the reasons we're doing this documentary is to provide the context so that people who do have these devices come to us, and we have a strategy that we briefly outline in this documentary of how to fix this problem. Well, how do you fix it? The big mistake people make, they try to patent it. And we have actually a national security order denial on a patent of one of these devices from an inventor I know. So we're going to prove this is not a conspiracy theory. Here it is from the patent office. So they ain't going to allow it. It gets confiscated. We have a patent examiner who's a PhD physicist testifying that they confiscate these things. That's in the movie. We say, okay, how are you going to get it out then? You have, if you try to keep how it operates secret, then you're very vulnerable. So one of the things I did for the disclosure project for my own security is to decentralize everything I have. It's called detargeting. So why have a big bullseye on your ass when if you were to disperse all your information and intelligence, which I have done, it would still be out there. Moreover, you create a dead man trigger. So since the 90s, I've had a dead man trigger of stuff I'm holding back. If something happens to me, that hits the internet, and every celebrity that supports what we're doing that can reach 1 billion people, they get it, they put it out on Instagram, and boom, and this is stuff they do not want out. Mm-hmm. It's names, it's stuff that I have not released, and where and who. But people say, why don't you release it? I said, well, this is one of my insurance policies. But what these inventors don't get is that they don't do that. They have no SecOps. So they have no security protocols. They just think I have a better mousetrap. The world's going to beat a path to my door. When in reality, Murder Incorporated beats a path to their door. Okay. Or it just gets confiscated. Most of the time, it's not even that. They're so crazy. They think we're going to keep this secret. Nobody will know how it works. And I'm going to just sort of be able to get it out there without no one proving it. And I said, no. If you're making an outrageous claim that you're pulling energy out of the space around us, it's got to be released for scientific review. It's got to be reproduced by multiple labs and people who are skilled in the art. You got to open source it. Open source means it's just out there. At the first level. Now, maybe at the second level, you could patent, because then the whole world knows. So what we're proposing is that at a level 1 phase of these new technologies coming out, we're going to leave the things that fly alone, because those could be missile delivery systems. But the things that would run your house, your car, whatever, a boat, a truck, those need to come out like 100 years ago. So the way to do it, and this we outline, is that we would disclose it publicly on blockchain protected systems massively, multiple celebrities. And the first 20 of these devices we would reproduce would be running Demi Lovato's home, or Leo DiCaprio's house, or Dave Grohl, the Foo Fighters, or whoever, all these people interested in the subject. Why? Because the media could suppress this, but you can't suppress dozens of celebrities with 1 billion followers.
Yeah.
Got it? I mean, sort of like it's a very well thought through strategy. It's unconventional, because my view is you put a boulder in front of where we're trying to flow, but if you're water, you just flow around it.
No, I mean, it makes perfect sense. Even if they do try to suppress it once, because they could take the post, they could take the video. It's already been out there.
Out.
So many people have already seen it. They would have to delete the accounts before it gets out.
Well, they'd have to tear down the whole internet. So our plan would be to have a multi-nation, multi-site, blockchain protected release of the schematics, how it works, everything about it. So anyone could reproduce it if you know how to do that. I mean, I couldn't even make a toaster oven.
How many people do you think are out there that know how to produce this kind of technology?
Oh, hundreds, maybe more. Over the years, there have been thousands of these devices that have come and gone. Most of them, people just take it to their grave because they don't understand the strategy of what they need to do. So they'll make a deal with someone financially, and that someone is fronting for another interest that suppresses it and buys it out. It's called black shelving. Happens all the time in the corporate world. You want something that's a competition, you create a corporate entity, you fund it, get controlling interest in it, and then you just put it on black shelf. I know of multiple devices that would literally save humanity and the planet that's happened to. So you can't do it that way, because the legal and financial traps are real. The national security applications that have been abused and under the patent law are real. The lost century, this film is going to prove all this, to the extent that the public, and it's an hour and 48 minutes, but it's all there. So I think that what we're asking people is another ask. If you know of someone, or you have one of these systems, get it to us. We have a strategy and the contacts to get it out. Now, the second level, people say, well, I did all this work. I just want to make money on it. I said, that is the second phase. So once it's disclosed publicly, it's a little bit like DARPA creating the internet. So everyone uses the internet. and there's no one who owns the internet. But now that whole platform has created dozens of billion and trillion dollar companies, right? That's what needs to happen here. Because I think we have it, if we're lucky, 20 years to make this transition.
Higher, further, faster, baby. Wind, aid my.
I feel this undercurrent. Because I think we have it, if we're lucky, 20 years to make this transition.
Why do you say that?
Because the rate of decay of the biosphere, but also the geopolitical problems we're facing, when you have this growing number of the world's population in utter despair and poverty, and that's all based on the fact of the zero-sum game of our energy and financial system. There's no changing that. I mean, if all 8 billion people on the planet lived like you and I do, with air conditioning or trucks, the price of a gallon of fuel would be $100 a gallon. So the system we have now requires the geopolitical and military instability. It's a natural outgrowth of it. This is why when I had this conversation with Senator Barry Goldwater, who was the senior senator from Arizona who ran for president in 1964 and lost. John McCain took his seat. And I was at his home in Paradise Valley. I was just there this week, but this was back in the 90s. And he said, it was a goddamn mistake then and a goddamn mistake now. This was ever kept secret. And because he and I had this long afternoon discussing this and what the implications of the secrecy have been, but also what are the wonderful implications of fixing this. It's nothing less than starting a whole new chapter in human civilization where in 20 years, there will be no poverty on the planet, no pollution, unbelievable abundance. Because if you bring to zero the cost of energy, of transportation, manufacturing, you're creating a global economy that's decentralized, where every village, home, whatever, is self-sufficient. Mm-hmm. This is sort of a libertarian's dream, right? But it's also an environmentalist dream. But I tell people this crosses all the political left-right stuff if you understand what's at stake here. So in this one movement, you solve some of the environmental existential problems we're facing. You're going to solve a lot of these geopolitical problems with oil and oil supply, Mideast, Russia, gas. But you're also going to, in a real sense, liberate the world from the current system so it can flourish without it being a handful of centralized choke points for energy. That's the plan. Now, to do it, you need to have something that works. And I always tell people, a lot of people say, well, here's a black box and take my word for it. I go, no, I don't take the word for it. Something that's important, it's got to be, we have to have the plans for it. We have to reproduce it. And we have to be able to have other people, third party, and reproduce it. And it should work as advertised. Most of these inventors don't want to do that because they don't know anything about science. The sine qua non of science is independent verification and proof, and that's the other problem. A lot of these people have these inventions, but they keep the sauce secret. But no one's going to believe it. Why should they? I wouldn't. Yeah. Now, because I've gone into labs and had it tested, I know they exist, but they don't want to turn over the secret to the public because they're paranoid about having it's like Gollum. We use this in the movie, My Precious Ring, remember the movie? Yeah. And it's like they're trying to protect that, but they don't understand if they could get it out to the whole world as an open source, let's say proof of principle system. the next phase, they could then create specific products that could be patented. Why? Because now the public would demand it. The scientific community would have it, and the public would say, I want that. I want that thing running my F-150 truck.
Yeah.
So I'm not spending $100 to fill it up if you're a carpenter, like my dad. So that is something that, becomes a really powerful solution. We're spending trillions of dollars on, frankly, fake environmental solutions.
That I know you're right, because we actually covered, I did an episode on environmental solutions, which could help with fires, could help with world hunger, it could help with a lot of things, and it got zero attention. And these guys have been walked into Congress, been walked into the Senate. Nobody gave them the time of day.
Nope.
And
they need to contact here. If someone has something like this, and the reason they need to contact us is that I've worked with inventors since '91 who have had some version of these. And there's a certain number of known fatal mistakes they make that I'm outlining. So what I've tried to do, create a strategy that accounts for those mistakes. And it's kind of unconventional, because most people, when they get something like this, oh my God, I have to keep it secret. I got a patent, I got to do this. No. You take it quickly, because the most dangerous point is when you have something that works, but you don't have millions of people know about it yet. That's the window where it can be confiscated, where your lab can be firebombed, where it can be stolen, where you can be imprisoned or killed or whatever. So that is just plain not smart. Now, to most people don't know that 800-pound gorilla's out there ready to squash you like a wormy apple. They go, oh, I'm great. I'm fine as frog's hair. And until they get hit with these things.
how many of these devices have you seen personally?
Maybe a dozen or so over the years that have been legitimate.
Can you describe what a couple of them look like?
Well, one of them will be in this documentary, and it was out in the desert of Arizona. I was there in September of 2022, and this old guy had out there looked like a shoebox, and it was sitting there running. It's been there for 2 years, putting out 3 kilowatts of power.
You can synthesize the super weapon Blue Nova. His effect claims to return everything to zero. Such a handsome weapon. Don't you have it yet?
That filthy, stinky dork. Oh, how can a scumbag like Alex study at this university? Alex was a poor, yet the most talented and the most handsome.
Not that.
The average home, on average, uses about 1.5 kilowatts.
What's inside of it?
He had some fake circuits so that nobody could steal his little secret ring, like Gollum, Lord of the Rings. And there were some specialized magnesium alloy plates. And it was basically resonating with the magnetic field, sort of similar to what Tesla did with the Wardenclyffe, his big Wardenclyffe system, but a much higher tech version.
What was the Wardenclyffe?
That was what Nikola Tesla had out on Long Island. That was this wireless transmission of power, and it was pulling power from the magnetic field of the Earth and converting it to electricity.
Okay.
And that all eventually got blown up. But Tesla had amazing breakthroughs. One of the things we're going to show in this documentary, people think it's an urban myth, that the FBI raided his apartment when he died and confiscated all his secret papers. I have the Department of Defense letter to the FBI demanding that the FBI turn those over to them. That's going to be in the documentary. This
is all going to be in the documentary?
Yep.
Back to the box. Does it make any sound? How does it hook up to?
The only thing you hear are the things it's running. He was running air conditioners and lights and this and that. We had no wires going into it with any power. The startup battery was a little teeny 3-volt that you could take out once it was running. And
how does it connect?
To what?
To air conditioners. To
conventional wires. It had 110 and 220.
Okay.
And then so it could run anything. You could run your house. You could run your car.
How did this guy have it hooked up? Was it into did he have it wired into the fuse box or what?
No, he had because he didn't want to have that on the grid. when he did it on the grid, the power company saw that there was something going on, thought that there was a solar panel tied into the grid that wasn't legal because you have to get a permit. And so he had it off. He had his own workshop, another part out on his property, just running independently off of it.
Okay.
So all the wires, air conditioning, refrigerator, everything.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And so, but his strategy is to keep it secret. And he said, well, if someone got this and tried to figure out what was going on, I have a circuit in there so it destroys itself. It's this sort of paranoid inventor stuff, right? Which I get. He spent a lot of time and money and his life's work. But I say, dude, this is how you take this to the grave. He's elderly. So what I have seen over and over again is very frustrating, is dozens of these accounts where they got it to a certain point. No one knew exactly how they were doing it. They kept all that secret. Next thing you know, someone's bought it off. They've died or whatever, and it's lost forever. So we have to break this cycle. It's a crazy cycle.
You've seen a couple, around a dozen, I believe you just said. Are they all very similar?
Oh, no. They're very different ways. There are like probably 18 ways to skin this cat.
Really?
Yeah.
Are they all small, compressed, size of the shoebox type?
No, there's some that are big rotary systems that are bigger. Yeah. So you'll see in the documentary, I think we feature maybe a dozen of them historically that have existed with photos and videos and test results. It'll be an interesting documentary for people who we want to pull the curtain back on those systems all the way up to the reverse engineering and the things that fly that Lockheed Skunk Works and Northrop Grumman and these Raytheon have.
This is going to be, I cannot wait to see this documentary. It's coming out in June.
June 6th.
June 6th. Then you have June 12th.
Yeah, so 6 days later, we're going to have a National Press Club event again. Disclosure 2.0 in Washington, D.C.
I would love to be there for that.
Yeah, well, you're invited. And need many media people and podcast people there. The weekend before, that's a Monday, that weekend before on the 10th and 11th, we're going to have a conference open to the public where we be unpacking the intelligence archive, everything we've collected. Right now it's about 5 or 6 terabytes.
Okay.
It's huge. It's like crazy. Tens of thousands of government documents, photos, videos, drawings, and testimony of, I think we have 109 cases of crash retrievals where
109 cases.
Yeah. And when you see the drawings and what the military guys described and the retrieval of these, that's all going to be there.
Now, are these all these people that are bringing this information to you, and I think there's going to be a lot more because the whistleblowers for your call out, where are all these people coming from? Are they all from the U.S.? Are they coming from all over the world?
Some have been Canadian, Australian, UK. We have a big Russian file from the KGB era that was given to me. That's in the archive. Very interesting cases, landing cases. Marina Popovich, who was Pavel Popovich's wife, they were both cosmonauts, had encounters in a case where one landed, an extraterrestrial vehicle landed. And we have all that information. I flew her over in 1995 for this Project Starlight gathering, the very first gathering of these whistleblowers and witnesses. And then in 97, we did it again as for members of Congress off-site in Georgetown. Chairman of committees were there. At that stage, none of them had coalesced into a movement to get where we are now. And then in 2001, we did the National Press Club event. So this has been an evolving process. That's, when people say, when do you think this will be done by? I said 1993. So 30 years ago, in my optimism and naivete, I thought, well, if I put the best evidence together, that's what we called it for the president at the time. It was Clinton, the CIA director, all these guys. The best available evidence, BAE. You'll see that in markings on some of my notes that are in this archive. We're also going to release all those documents.
Marvel Snap is a collectible card game where we stripped out all the stuff that gets in the way of fun and gets everybody straight into the strategic action.
The first thing that makes Marvel Snap different than other CCGs is how fast the games are. This game is 3 minutes. We've taken your opponent's turns and your turns and layered them on top of each other so that you don't have any waiting. It's just your turn, your turn, your turn, your turn. You get to make all the decisions in half the time.
Leonardo da Vinci seems to have encrypted the Great Pyramid of Giza into the Vitruvian Man, along with an exact
commercial.
Last night at dinner, we discussed some of this, and you had mentioned that you have video of an extraterrestrial being dissected.
Photo.
Excuse me.
That is very strange from 1920s. The provenance of that is very interesting. A woman contacted me, and her grandmother had worked at at the Trinity site on the Manhattan Project. But then they got moved to Roswell, and her mother was there when those three craft went down. We found two of them. One wasn't found until 1951. And by the way, that was an early DEW, directional energy weapon, that downed those. People say, oh, they crashed in a thunderstorm. I'm quite sure if you can go through interstellar space, you can navigate an Earth-based thunderstorm. But I have a document, and this is in the unacknowledged book, of a field agent writing to J. Edgar Hoover about this so-called Roswell event, saying that these flying saucers, they called them discs, crashed because we had switched on a new, quote, radar system. So for those people who don't know, radar is often a euphemism for both a system that detects objects bouncing radio waves off of aircraft, but also in some of them are active warfare systems, electromagnetic warfare systems. So they had an early electromagnetic system in that new radar system. And this field agent, Guy Hottell, Hottell, wrote to J. Edgar Hoover as a field agent. I have that document. When I released it, the FBI had to release it. It became the most watched, looked at document on the FBI site. But it flat out says that that's what happened. So that woman, the grandmother, somehow went from the Manhattan Project to being at Roswell. Well, why? In 1947, the Roswell Army Air Base, it was before the Air Force was formed, was the only atomic bomb squadron in the world, the 508th Squadron, and the whole planet. So she was there. She followed that operation from the origins of the atomic bomb, out at White Sands and out there, to New Mexico. So when that event happened, apparently someone must have brought in, this is conjecture now, some kind of archive of previous encounters with these objects that went way back. And someone in the photo lab took a picture of a picture. We've proven that's what it is. And it's a extraterrestrial on a dissection with a group of doctors and what looked like some suits in the background. And we've had the top historian, medical historian in the world look at the equipment, the suits, the gloves, and dated it from between 1922 and 29. Now, the rest of it we don't know. We don't know what event that was, where it was taken. We're trying to track down the personnel that are in there, but we're talking 100 years ago.
What does the ET look like? Does it have arms? Does it have legs?
Yeah, arms,
fingers,
legs,
eyes?
head. The head is covered with a towel. Apparently it was badly mutilated. It had a weird, almost like a spine on the front, like we have a sternum that you could see, like a bumpy thing. Different hands and feet.
Two arms?
Two arms, two legs.
legs?
Oh, yeah. They're all like that.
Okay.
Yeah. And not tiny. I think it was around 5 feet. It's hard to tell from this photo. So we have a lot of material like this. It's going to be in there.
That's going to be in the doc, too.
Not in the documentary, in this archive. Okay. So one of the things we're also trying to find is someone who can develop, we talked about this, a website, so that we're refining this archive. This archive I'm handing off to the U.S. government already, the raw data. But we want to organize it more. Right now, it's just hundreds of thousands of things. I don't know if people realize how much 5-6 terabytes of data is. It's enormous. But what we wanted to do is create something that's available to the public and to the media. It has all of this. The only thing that won't be in there are the things that must redact people's names and their personal identifying information.
Not credibility, but I understand.
Unless they've become public already with the Disclosure Project or in some other setting, their information will be blackened out like you see an NSA document or something. Yeah. But what they know will be in there, their information. In terms of the content, like I was on the Nellis Range and I retrieved an extraterrestrial vehicle was down, or an ARV went down, a man-made UFO went down, and I was there, and it had gotten malfunctioned and broke apart, and we were picking it up. I have those kind of things, and so that'll be in there, but without the person's name and DD-214 and all that.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to make that connection.
So that's going to come out around the same. We hope. I can't promise this because I'm not a tech guy. In fact, if I have to turn my computer on, my wife does it for me. I'm an idiot. But, I'm a digital moron, frankly. But and I'll admit it. But if we can find someone to create a secure website that's searchable and well organized for this archive, we hope to have it up by June 1st.
Wow. I can't wait to make that connection. It's one of the most brilliant minds that I've ever encountered.
Great.
And, I think you're going to find a lot more use for.
Yeah, we need a lot of help. I mean, people, because I'm known in the public, think we have some vast business with a building, with staff. It's my wife and I do this out of a corner of our living room with volunteers and a couple people under contract to help us with things. It's a very modest undertaking. And a labor of love, but it's just the way it is. I'm not good at business. I'm good with ideas and science and strategy, and I need a business mogul help us. But anyway,
yeah,
we've gotten this far, but we need people who have that talent. But it's got to be someone who really can do. Also, the problem with it. It's not just documents. Now, we probably have 100,000 government documents from all over the world. Amazing stuff. But we also have video of all these witnesses that have allowed themselves to be publicly known. Most people haven't seen most of it. Because at the National Press Club and what have you, these documents, you can only show like the tip of the iceberg. This will have all of it. So a guy's interview, we may be able to use 2 or 3 minutes. But in here, it'll be an hour and a half, whatever. Yeah, much deeper dive.
I know this is going to sound like heresy, but no Warhammer game is complete without having the Tau as a playable faction. And apparently the developers over at Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus have realized that, as they're finally bringing those greater good-loving mech enthusiasts to the game. There's going to be 5 playable Tau characters in total, and the first to launch is Shozil. Shausel. Warhammer's always tripping me up with these complicated Xenos names. And this guy seems absolutely broken, as his basic attack summons in sniper drones that deal a huge amount of single target damage at long range, while his ultimate drops a marker light that brings in air support in the form of a seeker missile barrage. Starting December 18th and going for 2 weeks, Tacticus is actually running an event where you can unlock this guy for free. But be quick, because after it's over, you're going to have to grind him out the old-fashioned way. We still have no idea who those 4 mystery characters are actually going to be, but if this guy is any indication of things to come, the Tau are going to be a super powerful faction. Download and play the game right now for free by clicking on the link in the description. Big thanks to Tacticus for sponsoring this video.
All right. Commercial suck, I'm sorry.
Characters, iconic Disney and Pixar characters that will amplify.
Much deeper dive.
So it's an open source network full of all of these thousands and thousands of documents, photos, and videos, and interviews.
Right.
I know you have people on the inside here in the U.S. Do you have people on the inside in different agencies throughout the world?
Oh yes, we have had MOD in UK and MI6 and
any
Australian
Any with China, Russia?
Russia, yes. China, I've only had an ambassador from China that I've dealt with. Japan, I've dealt with some cabinet level folks. Interestingly, when you go to these other countries that are in the G7, let's say, the group of 7 countries, the big industrial powers, and I bring up, since the U.S. government's dragging its feet, why don't you guys take the lead? I'll hand it all over to you. And they just turn pale and go, oh no, we can't get ahead of the U.S. on something this sensitive. So this is why it's such a big breakthrough that the U.S. Congress has finally passed this bill and the president signed it, which is a rare moment of. What's interesting about this is that there's serious bipartisan support for getting to the bottom of this problem, getting to the answers. It's not partisan at all, and it shouldn't be. I mean, it should not be partisan. I mean, it has to be nonpartisan. And that's why I always try to couch things in. This is the tide that'll lift all ships, this information coming out. Unless you own stock in ExxonMobil. But, so.
Let's move into the JFK Marilyn Monroe assassination.
Well, some of the fun stuff.
Yeah, let's move into that. What do you know about that?
A lot. So some years ago, I got from the vault from a national security agency guy an envelope, and they had a big old Xerox of this document that would say wiretap of Marilyn Monroe, dated a couple of days before they found her dead. And it was signed by the CIA guy, James Jesus Angleton III. Now, he was a famous fanatical mole hunter and leak stopper at the agency back in the early 60s. Fanatical. And they had wiretapped Marilyn Monroe's phone, and she was calling up Bobby Kennedy and a friend of hers named Rothberg in New York, who was an art dealer, saying that she was going to hold a press conference to tell the whole world what Kennedy had told her about, and I'm quoting, the objects from outer space from the 40s found in New Mexico, a clear reference to Roswell and a couple of the other events that happened out there. That was the only one, by the way. And there was a 1945 crash of an ET craft that happened right after we detonated the first atomic bomb. That has just gotten a Trinity site. That has just gotten documented by a good friend of mine, Paula Harris, who's a researcher. It's a fascinating book. So, and there's material associated with that. But, so Marilyn, because I think the Kennedy brothers had distanced themselves because the affair she was having with Jack Kennedy was a little bit getting too well known, she was angry. And so she was threatening to spill the beans in a public news conference where the whole world would have been there. So before she could do that, Wetworks killed her, made it look like an overdose of drugs. But it wasn't. One of her friends way back in the day was this old, cool guy. He was named Burl Ives, who was an actor and singer back in the day. And he was friends. And he was on my executive committee up until he died. Interesting guy, 33rd degree Mason and all that, but he didn't know anything about the subject. So I go into his house in Anacortes, Washington, and I have this document. I didn't bring the original to it, but the one I have. And it's this transcript, and it flat out, he looks and he goes, now I know why they killed her. I said, of course. And of course, Kennedy was livid that happened because he had affection for her, even though he had the distance for political reasons. But he was working on an executive order at that time that would have dissolved the agency and a lot of these operations that were dealing with this.
The agency is in CIA?
Yeah. So before that could go through the executive review process, he was killed. Now, interestingly, it wasn't just the UFO issue, it was a bunch of issues dealing with this whole constellation of problems. Because remember, he took office right after Eisenhower. Eisenhower's last speech to the world And, he's a 5-star general, right? A 2-term Republican president. It was an Abbie Hoffman. He's the one who coined the term "beware the military-industrial complex."
Yep.
It was an anti-military.
I watched that.
He was anti-fascist, which is the collusion and control of government interests and the interests of the people by selfish corporate and moneyed people. That's what he was talking about. People have to get clarity on this.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it gets politicized. Now, this is where Eisenhower was coming from. Now, I have a witness, a guy named Stephen Lufkin, who was an attorney, but at the time he was an Army Signals Corps guy who was in the White House with Eisenhower. And he saw Eisenhower doodling pictures of UFOs and stuff. And he talked to him and he says, yeah, he says, I've lost, they're not telling me much anymore about this. I've lost control of these projects. Very interesting read. It's in the disclosure book.
It is. And
in that book. And so it's a worrisome situation because I've been able to piece together the presidential level of this back all the way to Roosevelt. By the way, Foo Fighters, yes, it's a rock band. They named their band Grow was in Nirvana after what a Foo Fighter is, which is UFO was called.
Really?
In World War II. So in World War II, we had these weird, almost plasma-like objects zipping around our aircraft. The Nazis thought it was a secret Allied weapon. We thought it was a secret Nazi weapon. So there's this medical doctor, this elderly guy was on my team. He was a hematologist, pathologist in Denver. And his uncle was General Jimmy Doolittle. And so this is how I knew this story. So General Doolittle was sent over there by Roosevelt to look into what the heck are these Foo Fighters. And General Doolittle comes back to the White House and tells Roosevelt, sir, those are, quote, interplanetary vehicles, I'm quoting. So,
interplanetary vehicles.
Yeah. So that's how far back this knowledge goes.
This is fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
You talk a lot about the Rockefellers.
Rent Ready is a property management solution for landlords. They're going to help you list your properties, give more tenants. They're going to help you screen the tenants, collect rent.
Being the manager of your properties is not passive.
Rent Ready makes it easier to be a landlord.
All right. Commercials suck.
Come to a game and drop $100, draw all the cards right away. So we
I hate that they make you watch the first stuff.
Yeah. You talk a lot about the Rockefellers.
Well, only to the extent that Lawrence, who was the philosopher king, Lawrence Rockefeller, who was the brother of David Rockefeller of Chase Manhattan, that's now J.P. Morgan Chase. Lawrence wanted to help with getting this problem fixed. So he hosted us at the Rockefeller Ranch in the Tetons and was helping do things behind the scenes. And then later he hosted the Clintons there under cover of a summer vacation to go through this material that we put together. The best available evidence is what it was called, the AE. But I think Hillary, if I remember correctly, he told me, Hillary stood up and said, we don't want to hear too much more about this. Too dangerous. But he and I got to know each other quite well. His heart was in the right place. Now he had people around him, we found out, who are actually deep cover intelligence operatives. I don't want to name who they are, but one of them, I was at their townhouse in Upper East Side. This guy had been ambassador to France for Reagan, on the board of Morgan Stanley. And he was with Yale. He said, he told me he and William F. Buckley, the conservative journalist, were both recruited when they were at Yale into the CIA to be embedded in the corporate and political world. And so he and his wife sort of were a duo that ended up then misdirecting Rockefeller in the wrong directions to stop that initiative. So people have to understand how really good counterintelligence operates and how you have operatives who can go in and turn things sideways. Now that's 93, 94, 95, and we're talking ancient history here. The big problem is people make these sweeping conspiracy theories. Most of the younger Rockefellers were actually very supportive of this coming out. Lawrence was, but now Jay Rockefeller, who had been the chairman of Senate Intelligence Committee, and David, Lawrence's brother, were both members of this committee. And I went out on the deck late at night with Lawrence Rockefeller. And one night when we had this gathering at the ranch, and this was before Clinton was there, and he turned to me and he said, my family, referring to these other folks, are jumping up and down on my nuts, quote unquote, because I'm even talking to you and doing this. I said, yeah, I'm sure, because they have a very vested interest in maintaining the secrecy. So there you have some people who were read in. Lawrence was the philosopher, king, philanthropist. He wasn't banking. He wasn't Senate Intelligence Chairman like J. Rockefeller had been. So you see, there are people who have been in the system who know, but they will turn to their colleagues and lie to them. So here's another pattern you have to get. Everybody have these sweeping, the Bilderbergers and the trilateral. I said, look, most of those folks couldn't find their rear end in a well-lighted room on this issue. But there are people involved who do know. And because they're part of this elite club, say the Senate, or what have you, or the National Security Council, they'll go, oh, we've looked into this. There's nothing to it. It's a hot air balloon. Yeah. It's a whatever. I had a guy from the Bohemian Grove come to me after we did the disclosure project. He said, oh yeah, there was someone there because this had hit the media so hard. And he says, well, I was involved in committees dealing with this issue in the U.S. government. It all ended up being swamp gas or misperceptions of Venus rising or a weather balloon that crashed in New Mexico. And of course, since he was one of them, there's inherent trust. So they have people who go, there's a place near Culpeper, Virginia called The Farm, and people are go there to be trained, to be professional disinformation, basically how to lie well and to embed yourself in lie. I know where it is. Anyone listening has been there, you know what I'm talking about. So so unfortunately, they're very, very good at embedding people in key places who then give false information to their brethren and their sisters in that organization who have, because of who they are, have instant credibility. So they're going to say, why are you going to listen to this old doctor? This is what it is, and we know. So I've seen this for 30 years. It's a dog and pony show. Very, very, very clever. And that's what happened to Lawrence. Lawrence got zoomed. He got basically diverted by these people he trusted, had been in his circle for years, and he ended up getting diverted.
Damn. Let's we're running short on time here, so I want to cover a couple of things. But
sure.
I would like to cover quantum of thought. Mm-hmm. Even though it's very unrelated to what we're talking about, it's a fascinating topic, and I want to dive into that.
Well, this is another whole show, and it's cool. So I always tell people, sort of the entry-level technological discussion on this is energy generation, propulsion, electric gravity. The real amazing information has to do with what quantum physicists call entangled universe. And actually Einstein called it the spooky effect of the same particle could be in two places at once because of what's called non-locality, where basically we think in terms of a straight line, point A to B in the universe or in space here. In reality, there's an aspect of the cosmos that is entangled, where every point in space and time is intimately connected to every other, but not at the speed of light or what have you, but instantly. It's called entanglement. Now, the ultimate entangled field or non-local field is consciousness. The father of modern quantum mechanics, Erwin Schrödinger, particle wave theory, in 1908 said, the total number of minds in the universe is one. It's a singularity. So people talk about the singularity. This is the singularity. And it has to do with the consciousness field. So what extraterrestrial civilizations have for their communication systems, they're not going to pick up this thing, right, at the speed of light and go and communicate from, let's say you're from the Andromeda galaxy, it's 2.5 million light years from here.
It's too slow.
at the speed, this goes at the speed of light. Yeah. So at the speed of light, it'd take 2.5 million years for the signal to get there, and another 2.5 million years for the person to answer and say, yeah, I'm doing fine. How are you? It's 5 million years. So we know, and I knew this when I was 18 because I had a contact experience, that these civilizations have both innate remote viewing capabilities, but they have technologies that interface with that quantum field at the level of a quanta of thought. So not just random thought, but like directional, like if you're looking at the device and you think to it, it transmits to another node, another point. So now we've known this for decades in the CIA and other agencies, because when they started studying the devices, not just the propulsion systems and the energy, but how are these guys communicating? They found these devices. And to me, this is some of the most interesting research that no one ever talks about. But if you look at Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which is our documentary about contacting and using this technique, the foundation of it is this. It's the science of consciousness and the science of the quanta of thought interfacing not only with each other, but dropping out of linear space-time. And so we call this trans-dimensional physics, physics across dimensions. And one of the dimensions is the so-called thought realm. And it's fascinating. And so now take that knowledge that maybe some mystics in India and the Vedas and meditation. I'll admit that before I was a medical doctor, I was a meditation teacher and studied all of this. So I kind of, after I had the contact experience, I went, what the heck? How did this happen? So I became a student of the ancient Vedas and Sanskrit and the meditation before I went into medical school. But interesting career track, huh? But you're unconventional. But what I learned was that this is how these civilizations are able to communicate in real time across 1 million light years of space.
Have you heard of string theory?
Yes.
Now, from what I've heard, the Chinese are claiming that they can communicate with their satellites through string theory.
It could be. I mean, I know that our intelligence community at the upper end of it, Deep Black, have systems that are interfacing with this technology.
We have this too?
Oh, God, way back. That got perfected between 1956 and 1965.
Can you describe string theory?
Well, I'll let a physicist describe string theory, and some people don't think it's quite accurate. I think a more accurate view of it is what I'm calling non-locality. Okay. In other words, where in the what's called entanglement, the interconnectivity. And this is why Ben Rich, who is the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works, said, and I have 3 people who were there when he said it at a lecture at UCLA, School of Engineering. And he said, this is in 1995. He was at the end of his career. And he had taken Kelly Johnson's place, who was founded the Skunk Works, the Lockheed Skunk Works, a U-2, spy plane, all that. And he said, someone asked, how would these extraterrestrial civilizations communicate? And he said, every point in space and time is connected to every other point in space and time in real time, instantly. And that's how they're doing it. And it's through consciousness, through mind. And of course, everybody there was like, these are nuclear engineers and whatnot. And they're going, what, WTF? But, that's true. So one of the things I get ridiculed the most for the work I'm doing with contact and consciousness, what people don't realize, that is the deepest secret that they have on this. Because if people understand that, they can bypass any intelligence system and remote view and see, or they can contact these civilizations. They have to be trained, So I train people we have an app. It's called CE5 Contact app. And the CE5 Contact app, there's millions of people using it now. And it's a whole training program on remote viewing, meditation, how to do this. But the foundation of it is what you're asking about. And that's the technological interface that I don't have. We have classified projects that have some of this, but these other civilizations have. I remember talking to a McDonnell Douglas became part of Boeing. One of their chief aerospace engineers is on my team, Dr. Woods. Very elderly now, but he was assigned by old man McDonald of McDonnell Douglas to look into this issue in the 60s. And he found cases where there were people who had contact with these extraterrestrial vehicles and the personnel, the beings, they're called EBINs, extraterrestrial biological entities. So the EBIN was there, and it had this little kind of black rectangular box. And it was used, so they didn't have to speak verbally like we are. It was kind of telepathic, but augmented with this technology. And it went back and forth that way. Now the human was just receiving it, but very clear. And then this EBIN was receiving it, probably innately, but assisted. So I call this consciousness CAT. And then the reverse, technology-assisted consciousness, where the technology project your remote viewing capability. It goes both ways.
Really?
So so let's say the guidance system on these interstellar vehicles, they can stand at a console and touch it or think to it and then navigate it. That's how it's done.
Wow.
We know how that's done.
That is fascinating.
Yeah. This is the really cool. To me, this other stuff is like introductory. But the stuff that really excites me is this, of course, and Elon Musk has Neuralink, where he's trying to create a interface between the mind and machine, but he's doing it with wires and things in the brain and what have you. No, we're not talking about that, because that's at the speed of light, at the speed of thought. And that, you're now in another universe. Now you've gone through the looking glass with this. And this question you asked is, to me, is the really amazing science.
I'm fascinated.
You know what they call this at the CIA, this kind of stuff? And at my uncle's old company, they call it WSFM. Anybody out there listening heard this? Weird science and frickin' magic. I'm using the F word. And at my uncle's company, they would call it PFM, just pure effing magic. But it's real, it's science, but it's really amazing stuff.
How much do you know about the Monroe Institute and their studies with the CIA?
Lots.
And Army intelligence. How long have they been? I didn't realize Army intelligence was using.
Oh yeah, General Stubblebine took his people through there.
How long has CIA been How long has CIA been utilizing remote viewing and working with the Monroe Institute?
I believe when Monroe Institute was later, I think they started those projects in the 60s and 70s. Monroe Institute was not that integral. They had a technique, hemisync, that they found stuff was useful for some people. And so a lot of people went through there. It's 20 minutes from my country house out here in Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains. Really? It's where they're located. Mm-hmm. So they did a lot of work with that. But it was sort of as a ancillary, not as a principal operation. Yeah. Now, Ingo Swann, who is one of the most famous remote viewers, was a friend of mine before he passed away. And he regretted what he had done with that. He wished he had done what I'm doing, which was something positive, instead of doing what he was doing with the agency. But he was the most accurate. He was incredibly accurate. Very interesting guy. I went up to his house, his place in the East Village in New York. He was this very flamboyant gay guy with an artist, and he was like this brilliant. He was all over the place. But we had just a great time, and he shared with me a lot of experiences he had with CIA operations, remote viewing, very accurate targeting of things in the Soviet Union and elsewhere out in space. He imaged objects out near Saturn that nobody knew were there, that they proved later were there. Really amazing.
Is this documented, some of the stuff?
He has a couple books out that may have mentioned some of it. A lot of times these folks will share things with me personally. I don't know if it's in the book. I'd have to look it up and see. He had one book called Penetration that you can get that deals with a lot of that.
Okay.
Yeah, Ingo Swann. But
would you consider what you're doing with CE5 remote viewing?
Oh, sure. It's a more advanced version for the purpose. So CE5 Contact in the app, you'll see the purpose of it is for humans to be able to liaison with these civilizations and bypass the government, who made a mess of this. So one of the things that we came to realize is that the management of this, and it's understandable how it tracked into military and intelligence operations because it's technological. We want to know how these things work. But the complete management of it that way caused there to be a huge mistake in the relationship between humans and these other civilizations. And here I want to put a button on this. When we detonated the first atomic bomb and the subsequent ones, when those go off, everybody knows what an electromagnetic pulse is. What they don't know is that there's an attending so-called scalar or longitudinal wave that is faster than the speed of light that disrupts the fabric and communication and propulsion guidance systems of extraterrestrial vehicles. This is why they came in huge force in the 40s and 50s. And this is why every single atomic and nuclear weapon storage facility, processing plant and base and ship has been surveilled by these ET vehicles, because when those things are used, it's like tearing the fabric of space-time. Now, there are a few, Jacques Vallée knows this, there are a few physicists who know this. And so what this U-2 spy plane pilot that I have brought to DC, this was his big concern, that the military has completely misunderstood what the concern from these civilizations are. And they've looked at it purely as a threat, when in reality, we're the threat. So I have an interview with Gordon Crichton, who was MI6 guy, British, and he's dead now. He says, yes, when we did that, we kicked a hornet's nest because we actually disrupted their entire system. And remember, entanglement. We think straight line speed of light, well, EMP, electromagnetic pulses, are going to reach Alpha Centauri or some star system. But these so-called longitudinal or scalar waves it's a point that goes out in a straight line without the wave function. Those are multiples the speed of light, and they're highly disruptive. And so this is something that the senators and the president don't know. So there's a whole scientific brief that has to be done on how do we get to this place. And because it's been mismanaged, this creates an existential threat for the whole planet, that we have people who don't understand it, who should, and the people who do understand it are weaponizing those systems. And by the way, that's how we have downed dozens and dozens of extraterrestrial vehicles. We're using these advanced energy weapons, but not the ones at the speed of light, the ones that are longitudinal or scalar. And those are ground-based, sea-based, space-based. We have NRO satellites with these things on them. And we can detect an extraterrestrial vehicle when it's dropping down out of transdimensional. So in other words, when it's not 3D, but it's moved through these other dimensions, and it's about to quote unquote materialize. There's a neutrino light scatter that happens. And the sats we have up there, the eyes in the sky, the really advanced ones, have neutrino light detectors on them that pick that up. That's triangulated, and we hit them, or try to. Dangerous. I mean, this is a very dangerous game going on. The president doesn't know this. I know it. I have people who have run the systems on my team. Wow. And we're talking, this foolishness is literally a threat to the entire planet, which is why, and I want to just remind people of this. This is in the Unacknowledged book. And it's a letter from the first CIA director to the New York Times in 1961, after Eisenhower left office. And his name was Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter, Hillenkoetter. And he said, part of the letter said, the issue is ridiculed when in high places it's taken very seriously. But he said, and this is the key point, the secrecy surrounding UFOs is, and I'm quoting, a threat to the national security. He had seen how badly this has gone. Now, this is 61. This is now 62 years ago. So this is why, again, I make this patriotic appeal to everyone listening who've been involved in this in any small way, doesn't matter. If you were directly had knowledge of a facility, an operation, a man-made device, an extraterrestrial device, reconnaissance, radar, whatever it is, please contact me at SiriusDisclosure.com, info@SIRIUSDisclosure.com, because we have to get this fixed, because in this deep, dark secrecy, there are, and when I say an existential threat to life on Earth, that's what's happening by this being mismanaged so badly. So there's a lot at stake.
There is.
Yeah.
Well, Doc, I know you got to get going here. You got a lot of other places you got to be, and I just want to say I really, really appreciate you taking the time to come here.
Thank you.
And for this interview, and I am.
All right, thank you, Thank you, Shawn Ryan, for being such a great host and letting the doctor just speak his mind. That was amazing. And that's it. That's all. I just wanted you guys to hear from the horse's mouth, so you weren't thinking I'm just getting it out of nowhere. Like this is the guy who sparked me to start following things. This is the guy who's always piqued my interest and got me into looking into things. And I just wanted you guys to really see a large piece of his mind. And he said, share this. So I shared it. So there you go. I shared it. We're going to push it. All right. So if anybody does know anything, if anybody has anything to do with anything going on with what that guy was talking about, go ahead, get yourself together and get all your documents and show up. Don't show out. All right. Have a good night. Web C.